Hello and welcome to my Galdera speedrun commentary video. My name is Quadriceps and I am a speedrunner of Octopath Traveler. For those of you who don't know, Octopath Traveler is a turn-based JRPG released by Square, and it has some really beautiful graphics and a fantastic soundtrack. So this category is called Galdera, and Galdera is the final super boss of this game. And as you might have guessed, in this category, you have to beat Galdera as quickly as possible. I've run many categories in the past, but Galdera is by far my favorite because there is just so much to do in this run. It really makes you feel like you're playing a JRPG. In this commentary, I'm going to be focusing more on the route and why we do certain things. And I'm gonna do my best to explain my thought processes as I was doing the run. So I really hope you all enjoy this, and let's get right into the run. So we're gonna start off with Tressa because she's gonna be the fastest character that we can start with. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to the shop and purchase and equip a wolf's bow. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna increase our elemental attack, which allows us to beat the first boss a lot quicker. And in chapter 1, we're kind of just being introduced to game mechanics. So right now we're being introduced to what's known as a path action. Path actions are how our characters interact with NPCs in this game. And Tressa's path action is purchase, which allows her to buy items from NPCs. And this is actually going to be used a lot throughout the run, and is one of the main reasons why Tressa is so good. So coming up, I'm actually going to purchase an extra healing grape from this merchant. And the reason for that is because there's a side quest which you have to do after Tressa 1. And it's a mandatory side quest because you need to complete it to unlock Galdera. So the problem is that you start off with 3 healing grapes, but if you take a lot of damage, you might have to use up all 3. So that's why I purchased an extra one there. So on this next screen, you're going to see me walk and run at the same time. The reason for that is that walking actually increases the distance that you can travel before you get an encounter. So if you were to run all the way from the start of this screen, normally you would get 3 encounters. But if you do a bit of walking at the same time, you can usually get past with just 2 encounters. I'm going to be running from all the encounters on the way to the boss because there isn't really much benefit in killing these encounters. And the battle system basically revolves around the 2 mechanics, so the break mechanic and the boost mechanic. So every enemy has a certain number of shields and weaknesses, and every time you hit an enemy for its weakness, its shields go down by 1. And when an enemy has 0 shields, it becomes broken. So when an enemy is broken, they take more damage, and they also lose all of their moves on that turn and the following turn. In addition to that, if all enemies are broken, you can also guarantee escape from that battle. But the reason why I don't break some of the encounters along the way is because it's also pretty slow to break them. But for this encounter here, this pirate here, he always is asleep. And when an enemy is asleep, you have a 100% chance of running from it. And the other mechanic which the battle system revolves around is the boost mechanic. So each character starts off the battle with 1 boost point or BP. And at the end of every turn where they don't use a boost point, they gain 1. And boost points allow you to increase the damage of your skills. For certain attacks, it also increases the number of hits you can do. And for buffs and debuffs, it increases the duration. So you want to take advantage of both boosting and breaking to finish battles as quickly as possible. So something about this fight is that it used to be done differently. We used to get an item known as a soulstone from the screen. Soulstones are consumable items which deal a fixed amount of damage. So they're pretty useful for dealing damage, especially when your characters are low leveled and not able to deal a lot of damage on their own. The problem with that strategy was, even though the fight itself was faster, getting that soulstone usually gets you 1, maybe even 2 encounters. And those encounters aren't guaranteed to be the pirate like the first encounter that we got. So we're not guaranteed to escape from those encounters. So on average, this new fight that we're doing now is faster than the previous method. So this fight basically is just you breaking them one by one and then taking them out. And then you kind of have to eyeball your HP as well and heal up whenever you aren't able to take any more hits. And before this fight, you also want to try to heal up in case you take a lot of damage. So that's why sometimes at the end of this chapter you might not have enough healing grapes, which is why I purchased the extra one before. Alright, so after chapter 1, the first thing we want to do is to get a skill known as Evasive Maneuvers. Evasive Maneuvers is a vital skill for speedrunning because it increases the distance you can travel before getting an encounter by a factor of about 2.5 times. So this is essential for the speedrun because it's gonna make getting across a lot of the screens a lot easier, as well as allowing us to go into higher level areas to get resources. And the normal way which we would get evasive maneuvers is to recruit a scholar character known as Cyrus. Scholars are kind of like the mage characters in this game. And evasive maneuvers is a support skill of the scholar class. Support skills are passive skills which are unlocked whenever you learn a certain number of base skills. So the normal method would be to recruit Cyrus and to get a bunch of job points or JP on him and then learn evasive maneuvers from there. So this is a very consistent method and is the method of choice when if you were to do this run in a marathon, or if you were, for example, a beginner who is just learning the route. But for a record attempt like this, you're gonna want something that's a bit faster, because it's a bit slow to recruit Cyrus and then do his chapters, and then have to grind for JP afterwards. So what I'm actually going to be looking for is a special encounter known as a Kate. Kates are rare encounters that have a 3% chance of spawning after Tressa's chapter 1. And then they give a lot of XP and JP when you kill them. So that's actually going to be how we're going to get enough JP to get evasive maneuvers. I kill the Kate here with a medium soulstone which I picked up from Mick and Mac. And then right after, I immediately learn a skill known as Hired Help. So right now we have to make our way over to what's known as the Scholar Shrine. Because since Tressa is not a scholar, we're gonna need to go to the Scholar Shrine to unlock Scholar as a sub-job for Tressa. So it's kind of like Final Fantasy V, where you're able to give your character sub-classes. And I taught Hired Help, which is a skill that is very important for this speedrun. Essentially what it does is that you pay a sum of money to deal a certain amount of damage. And depending on how much money you give, you can produce various effects. So I'm just going to the Scholar Shrine now, and I'm trying not to take any damage because there is an encounter before the Scholar Shrine which you will usually get. We usually try to walk to the Scholar Shrine because it gives us a very small chance of skipping it, but usually you are going to get this encounter. And what you're going to want to do is you want to use hired help dancers to kill the bird, and then it leaves you with just the sheep, so you can target it down with Tressa's bow and break it. Unfortunately, I get caught by surprise here, which is really bad, because the sheep has a move that puts you to sleep. And it can become really bad if it continuously puts you to sleep, and you can just die here. But what actually happens is that with dancers, there's kind of a side effect where it can deal, like, it can put random status effects on your opponents. So I actually put the sheep to sleep, which guarantees my escape from this battle, so that was really nice. And like I said, now that we are at the Scholar Shrine, we can unlock Scholar as a secondary job for Tressa. And then we can learn 2 Scholar skills, which gives her Evasive Maneuvers. Among those skills, we're going to learn Blizzard, because it's going to be one of the skills which we use to kill bosses later. And like I said, now we just equip Evasive Maneuvers. And now we can go on to the next phase of the speedrun, which is Exploration. So I mentioned before that Evasive Maneuvers is crucial because it's going to allow you to go into higher level areas to gather resources. So that's going to be what we're going to do now. Because our characters are not strong enough to kill bosses on their own, so for this early part of the game, you're going to want to rely on soul stones for damage. So soul stones come in 3 different sizes. They come in small, medium, and large sizes. Large ones deal a lot of damage and is gonna be what we're gonna use primarily to recruit other characters. And they can only be found in higher level areas, which is why we have to go on exploration before we start to pick up characters. And along the way, we also start tagging towns, because this game is a system of being able to fast travel back to any town that you have visited, which is really nice because it saves you a lot of time having to backtrack or travel again later in the run. So right now I'm just going to tag a town known as Cobblestone, and then I'm going to go and get more shrines. So we've already gotten the Scholar Shrine, so the next shrine we're going to get is the Warrior Shrine. There's nothing really much I can say about the Warrior Shrine at this moment, or the Warrior job, but when it does come up, I will try to mention it. And then after getting the Warrior Shrine, the next thing we're going to do is, first we're going to tag another town known as Stoneguard. Then we're going to head over to the Merchant Shrine. And the Merchant Shrine, the Merchant class is one of the most important classes when it comes to speedrunning this game, because it has access to hired help, which I already mentioned. Why hired help is such a vital skill for the speedrun is because the damage it deals is not based on your stats. So you're able to bypass the fact that your characters are very low leveled and don't have enough stats for bosses with hired help. The highest tier of hired help is called Veterans, and it's going to be the main source of damage for this early part of the run. The problem with Veterans is that they are very expensive to use. They take 30,000 leaves per use. So that's also one of the reasons why we have to go on exploration. It's because a lot of money can be found in higher level areas. And this money is used to not just purchase items, but also to use hired help veterans to rush bosses later. So coming up this screen is one of the longer screens. You can get an encounter even though you have evasive maneuvers. But fortunately for Tressa, she's able to break this encounter pretty easily with hired help. So what hired help bandits does here is that it kills the bird and then it breaks the bull, so you can just run from it. My PB before this actually dies to this encounter because I got ambushed. So the fact that I didn't die here puts me in a very good position. So you're gonna see me do something a bit strange on this screen. Before I go to the Merchant Shrine, I'm actually going to save at the save point. And then I'm going to quit the game and reload the save file. And what this actually does is that it reloads the step counter. So the reason why we do this is that this screen is really long. Even though you have evasive maneuvers, you are almost always going to get an encounter on the way to the Merchant Shrine. And because this is a high level area, getting an encounter here is really bad because you're most likely going to die to this encounter. So that's why we always do the save and quit there. But speaking of deaths, so this game has a really nice system of whereby it autosaves at every screen transition, and there's also a lot of save points around. So even if you die during exploration, you will just reload at the previous screen and you can just continue and try again. So this is really great when it comes to marathons, because even if you get some unlucky RNG and you die, it's not the end of the run, and it's not the end of the world, because at most you just lose like a minute and then you can just try again. And it's also really great for beginners because it means that they don't have to do the entire run again. They can just they can just start from the previous screen. But for a record attempt like this, obviously it's not very good to die. So we're gonna try to not die as much as we can. There's nothing really much we can do about it, besides trying to optimize our movement and not to take any extra steps. So I'm gonna try to make sure that my movement is as clean as possible. So this section of exploration is one of the more infamous parts of the speedrun because there are a few screens which can kill you, so this one included, the gold short screen. Luckily I made it past without an encounter. And then this next screen, the Grandport screen, is also dangerous. So usually you can get to the save point without an encounter, but after save and quitting, you have to get a Thunder Soulstone, and then on the way to Grandport there is a chance of getting an encounter. So, like I mentioned, this is a high level area. This is a danger level 45 area. It's kind of an end game area, like it's a chapter 4 area. So it's an you're supposed to be here. The game intends for you to be here when you're around like level 40, but we are like level 14. So we're really in an area where we shouldn't be, but we take the risk because the rewards far outweigh the benefits. I mean, the reward far outweigh the risks. Unfortunately, I do get the encounter here, which is very unfortunate. Like I mentioned, the Grandport screen is one of the more dangerous screens as well. You can still get an encounter on the way to Grandport. But the good thing about that death was that it's one of the faster deaths, because not only do the birds kill you in one hit immediately, but you also reload at the save point. So instead of reloading at the previous screen and having to go through an extra screen transition, you can just reload at the save point and try again. So fortunately for me, on the second try, I do make it to Grandport without an encounter this time. And now we're gonna do some errands. So the first thing I do is I purchase an Adamantine shield from the man by the entrance, and this is gonna be armor for later. I'm gonna purchase a few nuts from the merchant in the tavern, and nuts are consumable items which permanently increase your stats. And they're gonna be essential for our setup, so nuts are very good because some of them give you more bulk to survive certain attacks, and some of them also increase your damage. And without them, you won't be able to deal enough damage to a lot of the bosses in this run. On this screen, I'm also going to purchase some Pomegranates. Pomegranates are consumable items which instantly give BP to your characters. So this is really good because you don't have to wait a bunch of turns to generate BP. And then Grandport also has a lot of money, which is why we're gonna pick them up. And now we're gonna head back to Cobblestone, which we tagged previously. So the Cobblestone tag here already proving useful. Because in Galdera we have to complete the stories of every character, we're gonna tag pretty much all the towns that we come across. So after we're done with Grandport, we're just gonna start tagging more towns. And then I'm gonna head to a town known as Quarry Quest. Quarry Quest is where Tressa's Chapter 2 will take place. But when we go in, we're just gonna start the chapter but not complete it. The reason why we do this is because we're not strong enough to do the chapter yet. But there are some pretty nice resources in Quarry Quest which we want to pick up. Also, every time you enter a town and you're able to start a new chapter, if you decline it, you have to go to the tavern again to start it. So every time you're prompted to start a chapter, you definitely want to say yes. But so nothing really much happening right now. We're just running around and tagging towns. This early part of the run, where we're doing exploration, is probably the part with the most downtime. So it's a good time for reading donations if you're doing this run in a marathon. And it's also a good time to just chill to the music because this game has some really incredible soundtracks. So not only are the music when you're running around doing exploration really relaxing, but the boss battles in this game have some really intense music as well. Octopath definitely has one of the better soundtracks out of the games I've played, and I highly recommend it. So we're finally heading to Quarry Quest after tagging Sunshade and Clearbrook. And in Quarry Quest, we are going to purchase a few items. So I already mentioned soulstones. We picked up a large soulstone from Grandport. And then in Quarry Quest, we're going to purchase more soulstones. We're going to purchase a few medium soulstones and a large soulstone. So, like I mentioned, soulstones deal a fixed amount of damage. On an unbroken enemy, small stones deal 200 damage. Medium stones deal 1001. And then large soulstones deal 2007. And when an enemy is broken, they take twice as much damage. So soulstones are going to be very useful for dealing a lot of damage. A lot of Chapter 1 bosses don't have a lot of HP, so usually a combination of large soulstones and medium soulstones will be able to take them out. So we can bypass having to slowly break them and kill them, and instead just chuck a bunch of stones at them and one-turn them. Also, when you hit an enemy for its weakness, your attacks deal 1.3 times the amount of damage. So when we're gonna recruit the next character, I think the boss has about 2008 HP. So if you use a soulstone, a large soulstone that doesn't hit for its weakness, it won't deal enough damage. But if you use a soulstone that hits for its weakness, it's gonna do 1.3 times the amount of damage, which is 3005, which is gonna be enough to take out the boss. So something strange that you're going to see me do here is that I'm actually going to warp out of Quarry Quest in the middle of Tressa's Chapter 2. And the reason for that is I want to proceed by getting out of Quarry Quest. But the problem is that I'm all the way at the end of the second screen, so it's going to take a long time for me to run all the way back to the entrance. So what I instead do is I warp somewhere else where I have something else to do. And then when I warp back to Quarry Quest, I'm actually back at the entrance and I can just exit from there. And the reason why I go to Stoneguard is that there are two very important accessories that we have to pick up. So the first accessory is the Mighty Belt, which is an accessory which increases your physical attack by 50. It's not going to be used throughout the entire run until the end, but it is an essential piece of equipment for the damage later on. The more immediately relevant accessory that we purchased is the Elemental Augmenter. So the Elemental Augmenter is an accessory which gives you 100 extra elemental attack. And for reference, your max stat in any given stat is 999, so an Elemental Augmenter gives you 1/10 of that. So needless to say, it's a very strong accessory and something that's definitely worth picking up. And that's the reason it's totally worth it to get the Elemental Augmenter, even though we have to run all the way to the end of Stoneguard. It's just going to increase our damage dealt by elemental attacks by such a large margin. Alright, so now we're in Boulderfall. We're going to recruit our next character finally. We're going to recruit Therion, and there's a very specific reason why we want to recruit Therion. So Therion has a special ability where he's able to unlock certain chests in this game that are purple in color. These chests can only be unlocked by Therion, and they happen to contain a lot of money and strong items. So if you notice, when we were doing the Grand Port exploration section, there weren't any purple chests to open. But for this upcoming section of exploration, there are going to be a lot of chests that only Therion can open. And a lot of these chests contain items which are essential for the speedrun. So that's why we want to pick up Therion here. Every time you go into a new screen, it resets your step counter. But for Mance type dungeons like this, it actually doesn't reset your step counter when you enter a new screen. So that's why you see me get an encounter here, even though I just had a screen transition. But fortunately for me, this encounter is always the same, so I can break it if I get Therion to use a dagger on it. And then for Heathcote here, like I mentioned, he has about 2008 HP, and he's weak to Thunder, so we use a Thunder Soulstone Large here to take him out instantly. And this is a big reason why you have to do exploration before you pick up characters, is because using a soulstone like this and one-turning the boss saves just so much time over doing it the casual way, right? When you just break the bosses and then slowly deal damage. So now that we're done with Therion's Chapter 1, we can embark on our next section of exploration. So if you notice, every time we enter a new screen, at the top left-hand corner, it says that Tressa picked up a bunch of money. This is actually her unique ability. It's called Eye for Money, and every time you walk around, you travel in a screen where you can get an encounter. The next, after the next screen transition, you will generate a certain amount of money. And in lower level areas, it's not going to be very significant, but this money starts to rack up a lot when you reach higher level areas. So this is another reason why Tressa is such a good character to have for the speedrun. It's because you just generate a lot of money just by doing the run. You don't have to... A lot of money is generated without any effort, basically. So now we tag Victor's Hollow, and we're going to purchase a bunch of nuts from the man by the entrance. And then the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to head over to the Hunter Shrine. So before I actually tagged Victor's Hollow, what I actually did was I reset my step counter at the screen to the north. You can actually make it all the way to Victor's Hollow from the start of the screen without an encounter, but it's a bit risky. So what we usually do if we're on good pace is that we would reset the step counter there to guarantee that we don't get an encounter. So after getting the Hunter Shrine, the next thing we're going to do is to get the Cleric Shrine. So this next screen where we're going to have the Cleric Shrine, it's a pretty long screen, and there's nowhere you can really reset your step counter efficiently, so we're just going to have to run directly to the Cleric Shrine and hope that we don't get an encounter. So I'm gonna have to take a very diagonal path here. This is to minimize the chances of me getting an encounter. I actually do make a slight misstep here. I misjudged my distance, so I have to take a few extra steps to correct that. But fortunately, I don't get punished for that. So if you get an encounter either in Victor's Hollow or to the Cleric Shrine, you can kill it with an extra Thunder Soulstone Large that you have. But the thing is, you really don't want that because these Soulstones are going to be very valuable for later. Because not only can they be used to speed up killing certain encounters, which you have to take later, but they are also required for certain chapters. So the fact that I was able to save my spare soulstone there was pretty good. So after getting the Cleric Shrine, I'm gonna tag Stone here, and then I'm gonna head over to this area called Maw of the Ice Dragon. And the reason why we go to Maw of the Ice Dragon is that, firstly, it has a lot of money, but secondly, it has a very nice piece of equipment known as the Adamantine Hat. The Adamantine Hat is one of the best hats in the game. It has a lot of defense and elemental defense. But most importantly, it gives 88 it gives 88 elemental attack. And this is almost as much as an elemental augmenter. So it's a very powerful piece of equipment. Not just for armor, but also for damage. And it's in a purple chest, so that's why we have to get Therion before coming here. And this next section of exploration, we're going to go to a town known as Marcelim. On the way to Marcelim, we're going to get the Dancer Shrine. So the Dancer class is a class that's kind of focused around buffs. One of the most important skills for the speedrun is a skill known as Peacock Strut, which increases your elemental damage by 1.5 times. So even though we're going to use vets for most of the damage in the early game, we're going to want to eventually move on from that because not only is it really expensive, but the power also tapers off when you start to get to stronger bosses because, like I mentioned, the damage dealt from veterans is not dependent on your stats. So eventually we do want to get our characters strong enough to deal more damage. So we want to wean our characters off of hired help veterans. And we're going to be relying on elemental damage later in the run. So having the Peacock Strut to boost our elemental damage is really nice. So after getting the Dancer Shrine, we have to tag a town known as Wellspring. So what I do is I actually run all the way to the bottom of the screen to reset my step counter. And the reason for that is, if you were to run all the way to Wellspring, you're almost always going to get an encounter. It's kind of like the Merchant Shrine. In fact, you can even get an encounter on the way to the bottom screen here. So definitely do want to reset your step counter. And again, we're just tagging towns because it's along the way, and there's a lot of good resources that we want to pick up in Marcelim. So in this next screen here, I'm going to pick up some money, and then I'm going to pick up a Thunder Soulstone Large. And then I'm going to reset my step counter at a screen to the bottom. Because this screen is really long. So you have to reset your step counter here to avoid getting an encounter. And since we're in a high level area, you can really start to see that Tressa is racking up a lot of money just by running around. Alright, so the reason why we come to Marcelim, there's a lot of good stuff here. So we purchased a few nuts from the man by the entrance. And then we head into the palace to purchase some pomegranates, some soul stones, and then we pick up 2 pieces of armor that are in chests in the palace. So these pieces of equipment are very nice because our characters are really squishy, so having the armor to increase their defense goes a very long way. And it's actually going to be essential for some of our setup to ensure that our characters don't die to bosses. So we pick up the armor here, the High House's armor, and then the Enchanted Circlet. And then that's 2 out of 3 of the exploration for this section. So the last section is the Everhold section. And it's probably the most stressful section of this exploration because it's the last branch of exploration that you have to do. And it's also one of the most dangerous. So on the next screen, we are going to pick up a light soulstone, large, and then we're going to pick up a silver pouch, which can be sold for money later. And then we're going to do a save and quit because the screen is incredibly long and you're never going to make it to Everhold without an encounter, even if you don't pick up the items. In fact, you can even get an encounter going from the save point to Everhold. We also tag Everhold because there's a very important piece of equipment that we want to pick up there as well. It's called the Sorceress Robe, and like the Adamantine Hat, it gives a lot of elemental attack as well. So it's gonna be one of the main equipment which we use on our magic users for damage. And after tagging Everhold, we're going to go back to the save point and do a saving quit, and then we're going to go into this this next area known as Everhold Tunnels. And Everhold Tunnels is probably one of the most stressful maps that you can run through. It's the last screen that you have to go through for exploration, and it's also very likely to kill you. I think we did a data mine on it, and we determined that there's about an 80% chance that you can get through without an encounter. So a 20% chance to die here is actually pretty significant. But the reason why we go to Everhold Tunnels is because there's a lot of essential equipment that we have to pick up. 2 pieces of equipment, actually. So the first thing that we really want from Everhold Tunnels is the Knowledge Staff. The Knowledge Staff is one of the best staffs in this game. It gives 333 elemental attack, I believe, and it's the best staff that we can get our hands on for the early part of the speedrun. And again, it's just here in Everhold Tunnels, and it's also in the purple chest, so that's why you need Therion. But you can just pick it up for free here, which is why we have to come to Everhold Tunnels, because we're going to be using magic to deal damage as well, and having the knowledge stuff makes it possible to deal a lot of damage with our magic, along with the other pieces of equipment that we got. The second piece of equipment that we get is the Death Cleaver. It's one of the best axes in the game. Not only does it deal a lot of damage, but it's also going to be essential for the endgame fight against Galdera. So Everhold Tunnels is a map that is a place that is essential to go to, even though a lot of runners dislike it. But once we're past Everhold Tunnels, that is basically just a lot of the early game exploration done. And you can breathe a huge sigh of relief now because the screens that are very likely to kill you are now gone. And now you can start to pick up other characters. So now we can actually pick up Cyrus. So again, if you were doing this in a marathon, or if you're not looking for a cape, you would pick up Cyrus first and then do your exploration. But because this was a record attempt, we we killed a Kate, and then we did the exploration first with Evasive Maneuvers. And then now we can pick up Cyrus. So there are some reasons why we want to pick up Cyrus. We need Cyrus to do a Scrutinize later on. So a Scrutinize is Cyrus's path action, which allows him to interrogate NPCs for information. And some of this information can uncover hidden items. Some of it can be used to complete quests. And the important Scrutinize that we have to do with Cyrus later is to unlock certain items in a shop. And that is the main reason why you need Cyrus now. But now you're going to see the power of the equipment that we picked up. We're going to use Tressa's Blizzard here to deal a lot of damage to Russell, along with the large soulstone that we purchased in the Everhold. So before Russell, we actually gave all of the equipment that we picked, all of the magic equipment that we picked up, and we gave it to Tressa. So we gave her the Knowledge Staff, the Sorceress Robe, the Adamantine Hat, and the Elemental Augmenter. And then the High House's armor, and then and the Enchanted Circlet, which we picked up in Marceline, were given to Therion because he's kind of squishy, and for the later part of the run, you're going to need some armor on him anyway. This is actually gonna the High House's armor is actually gonna stay on Therion for a large portion of the run, so it makes sense to give it to him now. And this is actually a new strat that was introduced recently, so we scrutinize this man here. It's gonna give us a nut, but we're not gonna pick it up yet. But it will allow us to skip a certain item later on. So keep that in mind. And also one of the reasons why we do Cyrus now is because completing his Chapter 1 puts you outside of Atlas Dam. So you can just run to the next area which you have to go to now, which is Flame's Grace. So it's not really a good time if you're to be Cyrus, because Cyrus used to be the main sorcerer when it comes to the speedrun. So the sorcerer is a class which we're going to use to deal a lot of damage later once we're done with hired help. Cyrus used to be the main damage dealer for the run. But the problem with Cyrus is that the Cyrus route had a lot of late game inconsistencies, as well as Cyrus's special ability, Study Foe, which at the start of every battle, Cyrus reveals a weakness of each enemy. And for a casual playthrough, this is really nice, but in a speedrun, since all the relevant weaknesses we already know, and the fact that Study Foe is a 2-second animation, just having to bring Cyrus around for the entire run as your main sorcerer loses you like 2 minutes. So that's one of the big reasons why Cyrus has fallen out of favor. And the route that I will be doing in this speedrun is actually known as the Ophelia Sorcerer route, so we use Ophi as the main sorcerer instead of Cyrus. And Ophi is a really nice character to have as the sorcerer because her path action guide allows her to address some of the inconsistencies in the Cyrus route towards the late game. And the fact that she doesn't have Study Foe already saves you like 2 minutes. So I will get into why guide saves you more, why guide is more consistent when we get there. It will only be relevant in the later part of the run, but I'll mention it later. But for now, we're gonna pick up Ophi, and then we're going to do her Chapter 1. So Guardian here has about 8006 HP. I get a pretty good turn order, so I can break him before he does anything. I actually learned recently that Ophi has a chance to die here if Guardian high roll crits her. So pretty nice that he didn't get a chance to attack. So since he has a lot of HP, Blizzard actually doesn't deal enough damage, so I have to use a medium soulstone to deal the remaining damage. But you can see how useful soulstones are. So we're actually going to be finishing Ophi's story first, and there's a very good reason for that. So finishing Ophi's chapter 4 unlocks a accessory known as the Friendship Badge. And the Friendship Badge is an accessory which gives you a 1.5 time increase in your JP earned from each battle. And throughout the run, you're actually going to need certain amounts of JP at certain points to learn certain skills. And having the Friendship Badge speeds up this process by a lot because you don't have to grind extra encounters. You don't have to grind as many encounters to get JP. So we already don't have enough JP from just killing bosses, so we have to kill extra encounters on top of that to get enough JP to learn our skills. So the Friendship Badge is really beneficial, and it's the main reason why we do Ophi first. So now we pick up Alfyn. We swap him out for Therion because we don't have any more space in our party. Therion's not useful for this section, so we're just going to kick him out for now. And once we're done with Cyrus's Scrutinize, we're going to get Therion back into the party. Why we get Alfyn now is because Alfyn's a very strong character when it comes to the speedrun. He brings a lot of utility when it comes to his battle skills. Alfyn has a special ability known as Concoct, where he's able to mix together a bunch of ingredients to produce certain effects. And some of these concocts are extremely strong. And that's one of the main reasons why we use Alfyn. He's just a very versatile character. And again, just using soul stones to make short work of the bosses and Blizzard at the same time. So one difference between the Ophi and the Cyrus route here is that the Cyrus route actually gets Alfyn after finishing Ophi's chapters because it doesn't have space in the party for Alfyn at this point. But since we're going to be using Ophi as the main magic user for pretty much most of the run, we don't need Cyrus in the party, so we can have Alfyn. So Ophi, Tressa, and Therion are basically going to stay in a party for the entire run, and for pretty specific reasons. And the last character is kind of flexible. So we pick up Alfyn early because he's very useful to have in a party. He's actually going to be the character that, apart from Ophi, Tressa, and Therion, that's going to stay in our party for the longest. And a lot of fights in the past used to be longer, but with new strats from revolving around using Alfyn's concocts, a lot of the fights have been shortened. And I'll mention those when we get there. But now that we're done picking up Alfyn, we can finally start progressing with Ophi's story. So we're going to head over to Saintsbridge now, which is where Ophi's Chapter 2 will take place. So in Saintsbridge is where the very important Scrutinize we have to do with Cyrus is going to take place. The reason why we need the Scrutinize is because it's going to unlock a very important accessory in the shop here. It's going to be an accessory called the Empowering Bracelet, which increases your max HP. And this is going to be vital because our characters are very squishy and we're going to need the extra HP to live attacks. So you absolutely have to do this Scrutinize. The problem with the Scrutinize is that it's only a 30% chance. And if you fail a Scrutinize, you lose a reputation in this town. So in every town, you start off with 5 reputation. For path actions such as Cyrus's that have a percentage chance of working, every time you fail it, you lose 1 reputation. And if you run out of reputation, you cannot use any more path actions in that town. unless you go to the tavern to reset it. So you really don't want to fail your scrutinizers. But Cyrus got it first try, so that's really nice. And now I'm going to do the first big menu in this game. I'm first going to swap my party order so that Ophi's at the first slot, because every time you defend, your cursor resets to Ophi. Or rather, this game remembers where your cursor is, so every time you use an item or a skill on a certain character, it remembers that position. And every time you defend, it resets to the default position, which is the first character. And since you're going to want a lot of your buffs to be going on Ophi, it makes sense to have her in the first position, so that when the cursor defaults, it goes to her. So it saves inputs over having her in a different slot. In that menu, we'll also give the nuts to our characters, so we give some of the nuts to Ophi and some to Tressa. So the nourishing nuts are used to increase our HP, and this is for survivability. The magic nuts all go to Ophi because she's going to be the main magic user for a large section of the run, a large portion of the run, all the way up till the end. Invigorating nuts are also to Ophi because it increases her maximum SP, and this allows her to use more skills without having to heal as often. And the fortifying nuts increase physical attack, and those are given to Therion because he's going to be the main source of physical damage for the final fight. And then for the equipment, since we're not going to use Tressa anymore for magic damage for now, we move all her equipment to Ophi. So we unequip everything from Tressa, and then we optimize Ophi, which assigns all of the good items to her. So something about equipment menus is that you want to try to use optimize as much as you can, because it saves time over having to manually equip individual pieces of equipment. And then we also give Alfyn the Death Cleaver, which we picked up in the Everhold tunnels, because he's going to make very good use of it to deal damage. And in the skills menu, we gave Ophi Blizzard so she can start dealing magic damage. We gave Alfyn Amputation, which is a very strong axe skill. And then we gave Therion Armor Corrosive, which is a very important debuff. So Armor Corrosive increases physical damage dealt by 1.5 times. So not only does it affect Amputation, but it also affects Hired Help Veterans. Because Hired Help Veterans, even though it's not dependent on your character's stats, it is affected by debuffs such as Armor Corrosive. So having Armor Corrosive on is always mandatory when you use Hired Help Veterans, because it allows you to deal a lot more damage with the same amount of money. And this fight here against Horadvanir is gonna be the first instance where we use veterans, and you're gonna see why Hired Help Veterans is so strong. We use Alfyn's Concoct here, and this is one of the reasons why Alfyn is so versatile, because his Concocts also can be used to break enemies. Amputation here is going to deal a nice bunch of damage, especially with the Death Cleaver. Blizzard as well. But the main bulk of the damage is going to come from Hired Help Veterans. So Horadvanir has about 35,000 HP, and Hired Help Veterans just did about 25,000. So a really, really strong skill, and now you can see why we're gonna be relying on Hired Help Veterans for this early section of the run. So now that we're done with Horadvanir, the next thing we do is we want to go and purchase the Empowering Bracelets that we scrutinized. So this is why you needed Cyrus to do that scrutinize, so you can buy the Empowering Bracelets right after Ophi's Chapter 2. So we purchased 5 Empowering Bracelets here, and then we sell some of the money items because we're going to need some money for this upcoming section. We unequip the Adamantine Shield from Ophi, because we want to give it to Tressa, which will be part of her equipment setup for later. Then we heal up, and then we do a next job menu to teach them skills. We give Alfyn 2 warrior skills. This unlocks a support skill known as cover. So what cover is that when when a character is below 30% HP, if they were to take another physical attack, a character with cover would take the attack for them. So this is really good for safety and basically allows our characters that aren't able to survive a lot of hits to be protected by other characters. So you might hear me refer to this as being put into cover range. Because we don't have enough armor and equipment, other equipment and accessories to go around, so we're gonna want to protect our weaker characters with cover. And in that menu, we also give Therion the Peacock Strut. So we gave him the Dancer class, and then we gave him the Peacock Strut, because from now on, we're gonna... For some of the fights, we're gonna need the extra damage from Ophi. So this is another instance of warping out to somewhere else where you have something to do. So it's similar to that time when we were in Query Quest. So to continue with Ophi's story, you're gonna have to go all the way back to the first screen. But so instead of running out of the church and running back to the first screen, which is really slow, what we do is we go over to Northreach here. We go over to Still Snow, and then we tag a town known as Northreach. So along the way in Northreach, the screen is very long, and you're not able to do a save and quit because the save point is too far up. So you're always gonna get an encounter. The good thing though is that this encounter is always the same, so it's very easy to plan for it. And it's always these 2 lizards, and they only have 2 shields and are weak to axe, so you're able to break them with hired help bandits. They also like to debuff you instead of attacking you, so usually this fight is very safe. Unfortunately, I do get caught by surprise, so this might be bad if they decide to decided to attack and kill certain characters. Tressa actually does go down, so this is not the best situation right now. But fortunately for me, the last lizard here decides to lower my stats. So I'm able to break them immediately and then buff up Ophi so she can kill the lizards. And you want to kill these lizards because, like I mentioned, you're going to want to start killing encounters for XP and JP so that you can get enough JP to learn some skills later on. And this encounter is very convenient and easy to kill. The levels are also very nice because they give you more HP to survive attacks later. And it's actually going to be important for our setup for Ophi's Chapter 4 boss. So over in Northreach, we purchased the Empowering Necklace from the guy by the entrance. So the necklace is like the bracelet, except it gives you 1000 HP instead of 500. So it's a very useful piece of equipment. And then we purchased a bunch of nuts. And now we give the necklace to Ophi, and then we give the bracelet to Tressa, and then we give the nuts to Ophi and Tressa. So something about this magic nut that we purchased, you can actually give it to Ophi later. But if you do that, it makes the upcoming boss a range to be killed. So I like to give the nut to Ophi as I'm healing both Ophi and Tressa in that menu. So Ophi's Chapter 3 has 2 screens. Ideally, you want to skip the encounter outside and take the encounter inside. Sometimes you do get the encounter outside though, so you can choose to save and quit inside to skip the encounter. But overall, you want to take 1 encounter in this chapter. I skipped the encounter outside, which is really nice. So now I can take the encounter inside. So this encounter that I get is pretty good. I can kill it pretty quickly. I do have to use a light soulstone to kill it though, which is a bit unfortunate because I kind of want to save the light soulstone specifically because it might be useful in Ophi's Chapter 4. But I'm not complaining too much because this encounter was very fast to kill. Especially because when you get elementals, they're kind of dangerous. They have like very strong elemental attacks, so you want to kill them as quickly as possible. The good thing is that they usually just die to a large soulstone that they're weak to. So this is Ophi's Chapter 3 boss, MMSF, Mystery Man and Shady Figure. It's a completely scripted fight. What we do is just we apply armor corrosive to each of them and then we take turns to break them. On the second turn, Shady Figure uses a AoE light attack. And that's kind of why we wanted the bracelets on characters, so that they can lift this attack. And now we just break them and then kill them with Vets and Lightning Blast. So a lot of time Vets aren't going to deal enough damage. So we're going to use either Soulstones or Magic to deal the remaining damage. So now that we're done with Ophi's Chapter 3, we're going to want to proceed on with her story. But before that, we're going to do a few errands first. So if you recall, I mentioned that there's a quest that you have to complete to unlock Galdera. So we're going to... it's a series of quests, so we're going to do the next part now. And kit the traveler which you gave the healing grape to after Tressa Chapter 1 to complete the quest. He's now in Noble Court, so we're gonna go to Noble Court now to complete the next part of his quest. So while we're there, we also start Therion's chapter. So we do this now because in order to complete this quest, we have to guide an NPC on the next screen. And then to proceed with Therion's chapter, we also have to go to the next screen. So it's a convenient thing to do now. And what guide is, it's Ophi's path action, which allows her to bring NPCs around. And you can actually summon them into battle, and they have different skills. But for the purposes of this speedrun, it's actually not relevant because what the NPCs do in battle is completely dependent on luck. So for the purposes of this speedrun, guide is only going to be used to complete quests. But it's the main reason why, it's one of the main reasons why the Ophilia route is a lot more consistent than the Cyrus route. It's because towards the end game, there are two NPCs which you have to guide. And because in the Cyrus route, Ophilia is not at a high enough level to guide these NPCs, you have to use the counterpart to Ophelia's path action, which is Primrose's Allure. And the thing is that these allures are about a 30% chance, so it's the same chance as Cyrus's Scrutinize and Saint's Bridge. So there's kind of like a difference between these two path actions. So path actions in this game are split into rogue and noble path actions. Rogue path actions like Cyrus's and Primrose's can be used anytime, but they are based on percentage, and if you fail, you lose reputation. Whereas noble path actions like Ophelia's, are usually locked behind some sort of level cap, level requirement. Or in the case of Tressa, you need to have enough money to purchase items. But in return, they always work. So the fact that we can use a high-leveled Ophi to guide these two NPCs towards the end of the run makes the route a lot more consistent. So now we're just proceeding with some of Therion's story. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to go to Whisper Mill. So we need to get out of Noble Court. The good thing is that this quest actually puts us outside the Noble Court. So we complete it now and then we can run to Whisper Mill from there. So like the Northreach screen, this screen is too long to not get an encounter. So what usually happens is you get these two drakes, which you break with Arrow Storm since they're 2 shields and weak to bow, and then you kill them with Lightning Blast and Peacock. What I actually end up getting though is a Chubby Cape. So Chubby Capes are the highest tier of capes. They give a lot of money, XP and JP. But they have a very high chance of running away, so if you don't manage to kill it in time, it will usually just run away. And that's really bad because it leaves you with only 1 Drake, so you get half the amount of XP and JP that you normally get. But what I actually get is that I actually preempted this fight, so that's really good because it essentially means that I can kill this Kate, almost guaranteed. So I actually don't deal enough damage with the Lightning Blast here, but I can deal the remaining damage with a medium Soulstone. And you can see that I gained a lot of XP and JP. So the Chubby Cake gives you 50,000 leaves, and it gives you about 2,000 XP and 1,000 JP. And this is humongous because normally that encounter gives you only like a tenth of what you get from the Chubby Cake. So I mentioned that you're going to want to start killing encounters later on because you're going to need to hit certain thresholds. The fact that I got a Chubby Cake here means that there's a lot of potential for time save later because I can skip a lot of these encounters which otherwise would take some time to kill. So right now I'm in a very good position. So before that, we are just gonna finish up Ophi's story. So now we're in Whisper Mill. And on this next screen, I'm gonna pick up a Giant's Club, which is which is an item which we will be selling for money. And then on the subsequent screen, I'm gonna pick up a second Adamantine Hat. So this Adamantine Hat is going to be used largely for armor until the end of the run. But like I mentioned, Adamantine Hat gives a lot of defense and magic defense. So that's really nice. So after picking up the Adamantine Hat, we're actually going to give it to Therion. And this unequips the circlet, which we will give to Tressa. And this completes our equipment setup. So this equipment setup actually allows everyone except Therion to live 2 hits from Matthias. So Matthias is Ophi's Chapter 4 boss. And he does 2 attacks on the first turn. The first is a normal physical attack, and the second is a spell known as Consuming Darkness. So Ophi, Tressa, and Alfyn can all survive both attack and Consuming Darkness. So the only one at risk of dying is Therion, and he can only die if Matthias attacks Therion first and then Consuming Darkness. Because Consuming Darkness, if he uses it first, will always put Therion into cover range, so Alfyn will protect Therion if Matthias decides to hit him again. So if you calculate that, that's only a 1 in 32 chance of something possibly going wrong in that fight. something I also did was I didn't get if Tressa is at a low level, you would want to give warrior to her for extra HP. But since I killed a Kate early in the run, I'm usually above that level, which is level 21. So I noticed my XP here, and I know because I got the chubby Kate, my characters are pretty high level. Normally what happens is that before Matthias there is a fight, and after that fight you level off of that fight. But if your characters are pretty high level, sometimes they don't level. So what I did there was I tried to pay attention to who looked like he or she wasn't gonna level. And I noticed that Alfyn was pretty far away from leveling, so I'm gonna try to heal Alfyn if he takes damage in this fight. So if Alfyn took damage, I would defend with Tressa so I can heal Alfyn with himself. But since Alfyn didn't take any damage, I could defend with Alfyn instead, so Ophi would be the next one to act. So I could finish the fight very quickly. So this is just a bit of like on the fly sort of optimizations and adaptations that I'm making. And as I suspected, Alfyn is just a bit short of leveling. But he didn't take any damage, so I didn't have to heal him. So Matthias, like I said, it's only a 1 in 32 chance that Therion might die. So this fight is generally very safe. So if he uses Consuming Darkness first, it's free. He uses Attack first, but it hits into Tressa, so it's fine. So again, if Tressa was at level 21 for this fight, you would need to give her Warrior, because she might die to 2 hits from Matthias. But since she's at a pretty high level, I could skip giving her Warrior. So Alfyn's Concoct again proving useful to taking 2 shields off of Matthias. So now we just break Matthias with Blizzard, and then we just destroy him with Vets, basically. You're gonna see how powerful Vets are. We just chuck like 4 Vets on Matthias here. And that's gonna deal all the damage that we need to kill him, along with Lightning Blast. So Matthias has about 97,000 HP. And we're able to free turn him with the power of Veterans. So I did lose some time on this split, but since I killed the Chubby, I knew I was in a very good position. Because on the next split, I was going to be able to save a lot of time. So nothing much going on now. It's just after Ophi's story, there's this mandatory cutscene which you have to do. You have to guide Liana and then finish Ophi's story from there. And after Ophi's story, we are going to run some errands before we challenge the next boss. So this upcoming section is just preparation to beat Drysang. Drysang is one of the 4 secret job bosses. Essentially, there are 4 advanced jobs in this game that can only be unlocked after beating certain bosses, and Drysang is the boss that unlocks the Sorcerer class. So what the Sorcerer class is it's basically just an upgraded version of the Scholar class. So all of its skills hit 3 times, and they're very strong elemental skills. So the Sorcerer is actually going to be the main source of damage moving forward, and it's the reason why every competitive Galdera route revolves around getting Sorcerer early. So the reason why we use Sorcerer is because all of its attacks are AoE, so it makes it very good for clearing random encounters. You're able to stack a lot of buffs onto the Sorcerer, so they get really the attacks get really strong later on. And it also allows us to stop using veterans once we get strong enough. So it's going to save us a lot of money. So what I did in Atlas Dam was I picked up the Nourish Nut that we scrutinized earlier. I stole a quest item, and then I stole a Flying Helm. So the Flying Helm is a helmet which gives Alfyn extra crit. So critical, when you crit an enemy, you deal 1.25 times the amount of damage that you normally do. And your chances of critting an enemy is dependent on two things. So the first thing is your critical stat. So the higher critical you have, the more likely you are to crit an enemy. And Alfyn's amputation has a plus 100 critical modifier, meaning that it has a very high chance that is essentially 100% to crit on every normal enemy. The problem is that how likely you are to crit an enemy is also dependent on your enemy's speed. And Dreisang has a lot of speed, so Alfyn isn't actually guaranteed to crit with amputation, despite the fact that amputation already has a very high critical rate. So the reason why we get the Flying Helm is because it gives extra critical so that Alfyn doesn't miss his crits on Dreisang. And then the next thing we do is that we guided another NPC to complete a quest in Whisper Mill, which gave us a lot of money. So the next thing after we went to Whisper Mill, we purchased a few stones in Whisper Mill. We purchased another nut, and then we completed the quest for money. Then we went over to Goldshore to do Alfyn's Chapter 2. So we want to go to Goldshore because after Ophi 4, there's an NPC that spawns in Goldshore that sells a Magic Nut L. And Magic Nut, we want to get all the Magic Nuts that we can get basically because they're going to be essential for our damage setup. And Alfyn's Chapter 2 is also one of those chapters where you have to run back to the first screen to proceed with it. So once we do the Inquire on the second screen, we warp out to Saint's Bridge. So now we're getting the Friendship Badge. Like I said, it's an essential piece of equipment that we're going to need for our JP routing. So once we're done getting that, we can proceed on with the rest of the section where we can start to get encounters. The next place we have to go is the Thief Shrine. So sometimes you can get an encounter on the way to the Thief Shrine. And it kind of feels bad because you don't have the badge for this encounter because you want to do the menu. You want to do the menu along with the Thief Shrine. You want to do the menu once you get the Thief Shrine, so you can do the job menu along with it. So if you get this encounter, usually you have to kill it. And it doesn't give as much JP because it's a lower level area. And you don't have the badge as well. But fortunately for me, I surprised that encounter, so I didn't have to kill it. So when you surprise an enemy, you're guaranteed to escape from it as well. So that was really nice, so I could just run from it immediately. Especially because I don't need the JP as well, because I killed the Chubby Kate. So in this menu, I give most of the nuts to Ophi. And then I give the Flying Helm to Alfyn and the badge to Therion. So we teach 4 cleric skills to Therion here. This is very important because it unlocks a skill known as Evil Ward. And Evil Ward is a skill which increases your chance of fleeing from encounters. So this is really important because in Chapter 1 and 2 areas, it's going to guarantee escape. And in Chapter 3 and 4 areas, it's not going to guarantee escape, but it is going to increase our likelihood of fleeing. And this is going to be very, very relevant and very important for consistency. And because you're going to need to teach Therion all the cleric skills later anyway, it makes sense to just teach him 4 skills for Evil Ward now. The next important skill that we taught was Snatch to Tressa. So we unlock Snatch by teaching 4 Thief skills to her. That's kind of why we need to go to the Thief Shrine. Snatch is an important skill because it doubles the amount of money that you can collect off of bosses or enemies. So Tressa has a skill called Collect where she's able to get money off of enemies. And some of these bosses have a lot of money, and you want to collect a lot of these bosses because you're going to need the money to purchase certain items later. And also to use veterans. So the Dreisang fight, Dreisang is more powerful than any Chapter 4 boss. He has 171,000 HP, which is almost 2 times the amount of HP that any Chapter 4 boss has. So normally, Chapter 4 bosses take like 4 vets to kill. For Dreisang, we're gonna need 6 to 7 vets. So the Ophi route uses 6 vets, and the Cyrus route uses 7 vets. But again, it's super worth it to rush Dreisang this early because it gives us access to the Sorcerer class. And once we get the Sorcerer class, we're able to cut down on our usage of vets. So something about that Orwell screen was that if I didn't get any extra encounters before that, I would usually kill the encounter there for XP and JP. But since I killed the Chubby Kid, I could skip it. So that's one of the few encounters which I can skip to save time. So now in Riverford, we complete the quest to get some money and a revitalizing gem, and then we purchase a few more nuts from this man here. So the revitalizing gem is a very strong item. It replenishes your HP, SP, and most importantly BP fully. We're not going to use it for this Dreisang fight most of the time, but it is going to be used later on in the run. So to go to Dreisang, you can either go there from Victor's Hollow or Dusk Barrow. I choose to go from Victor's Hollow, even though it's a bit slower, because there's a lot less chance that you can get an encounter. And again, since this is a Chapter 4 area, you're not guaranteed to escape from it, even with Evil Ward. But I do get the encounter anyway, so I don't need the encounter, so I decided to take the risk and flee. So thanks to Evil Ward, I'm able to escape from it. Usually for Chapter 4 and 3 encounters, you take like quite a few turns to escape from them, and it's really slow because every time you fail, you have to sit through the animations of all your characters failing to escape, and then you also have to take attacks from the enemies. Usually in this screen, you would get some money. You would get like 20,000 leaves and another item which you can sell later. But since I got a lot of extra money from the Chubby Kate, I decided to skip both of those items and go straight to Dreisang. And this gives me a chance of skipping the encounter, which I do get anyway. But fortunately, I was able to escape from it as well. So this is also one of the encounters which you want to take for XP and JP. So the fact that I just ran from it meant that I was very far ahead of my PB at this moment. So this Dreisang fight used to be done in a different way. It used to be a 7-turn fight, and the idea was that Dreisang would always hit someone on the first turn, and then after the first break, he would always use a spell. So the fight is geared up. The fight is set up in such a way that you would survive the spell, and then you heal up. You would survive the attack and the spell, and then you would heal up, and then Dreisang is guaranteed to use a wind spell on either the 4th or 5th turn. So you would gather a bunch of accessories which decreased wind elemental damage, and you gave them to some of your characters to survive that the wind attack that will always happen. And then you broke Dreisang on turn 6 and then killed him on turn 7. So that's how the old fight used to be done. Nowadays we just do Dreisang in 6 turns, so we skip having to get the equipment to tank the wind attack. And the fight itself is also 1 turn shorter, so it's a lot faster, basically. But some things to note about this Draisang fight, you kind of need to take advantage of your... Okay, so everyone in this fight is geared up to survive both the attack and the spell after the break, except for Therion. So if Draisang hits Therion on turn 1, you have to find a way to give him a great before the end of the break. So that's the only thing that might go wrong in this fight. You need to pay attention to your turn order if Therion gets hit. Otherwise, you have to use the Revitalizing Jam. But other than that, the fight is very free. So you just chuck a whole bunch of vets at them, at Draisang. And this is where we see Alfyn's, one of Alfyn's very strong concocts. So we purchased an Essence of Pomegranate from a girl in Clitterbrook after Alfyn won. This is going to be mixed with a Purifying Dust, which we purchased in Saintsbridge, to give 2 BP to every character. So 2 BP is the same amount of BP as a medium pomegranate gives, except it gives it to your entire party. So this is one of Alfyn's strongest concocts, and is one of the main reasons why Alfyn is so good and beneficial for this speedrun and this fight in particular. Alfyn really sped up this fight, and is one of the main reasons why we were able to shorten this fight to 6 turns. So that's Draisang, and because I skipped so many encounters, I actually saved almost a minute over my PB, and I ended with a Draisang split of 125, which is absolutely insane because a normal Draisang split would be 127 to 128. So a 127 is already considered a very good Draisang split, and a 126 is it's really, really good. So if you get a 126, usually it either means that you're on incredible pace or it means that you skipped a lot of encounters. But the fact that I got a 125 and I got 5000 JP at the end of Draisang was just absolutely mind-blowing. Because it means that not only am I super far ahead of my PB, but I am also... I'm still ahead in terms of JP. Because normally after Draisang, you would usually be in the ballpark of about 4.6 to 4.8 thousand JP. So if you have below that, you kind of want to take extra encounters. But if you have above that, you can skip encounters. So the fact that I was at 5000 JP actually meant that I can continue to skip encounters to save time throughout the run. So I'm still in an incredible position at this point. The 125 Draisang is just absolutely crazy. It is possible to get it without a Kate even. And if I didn't die and got a bunch of the other time losses before Draisang, I could have ended up with a 124 Draisang, which would just be absolutely unheard of at this point. So in that menu, we gave Ophi the Sorcerer class, because we're gonna, from now on, she's going to be the main sorcerer of the run. And normally if you need JP, you would kill the encounter here, but since I don't need it, I just run away from it. This is actually the encounter that gives the most JP here, so if I were short on JP, I'd be very pleased to get that encounter. In that menu, we also gave Tressa 4 Scholar skills to unlock Percipience, which is a skill which prevents ambushes, so another skill that's very useful for consistency. And then we gave her the Dancer class, so we can start buffing Ophi for more damage. So now we finally finished Tressa's Chapter 2. This fight is really simple. All you need to do is to Elemental Break. Elemental Break is like Armor Corrosive, except it's for elemental damage. Then you just donate BP, which is a merchant skill. You donate BP to Ophelia, and then you just kill the ads and kill the boss, basically. So donate BP is really useful because it saves you from having to use a lot of pomegranates. So you can see the power of the sorcerer here. Really strong, all its attacks are AoE, so it's very useful for these fights where there are adds as well. And that's chapter 2 of Tressa. So the next story we're going to complete is actually Tressa's story. And there's a very specific reason for that. So one of the differences between Ophi and Cyrus is that Ophi actually has lower base elemental attack than Cyrus. So she's actually at a power disadvantage when it comes to the speedrun. So beating Esmeralda would beating Tressa's story actually unlocks one additional magic nut M, which the Cyrus route doesn't get because Cyrus already has enough damage. So the reason why we rushed Tressa's story is also partly due to the fact that we need this magic M, this magic nut, for damage. And also for other reasons, which I will explain later. But keep in mind that this magic nut is one of the main differences between the two routes as well, because we need this magic nut to make up for the missing damage that Ophi doesn't have compared to Cyrus. So another instance of going somewhere else where you have something to do. Therion's chapter 2 has a lot of cutscenes and you have to go back and forth between the first and second screen a lot. So we're going to take advantage of that and warp in and out of Noble Court. From this man here, we're going to steal the Elemental Heavy Armor. So the Elemental Heavy Armor is a piece of equipment that's kind of like the Sorceress Robe. It gives a nice bit of elemental attack. We're not really going to use it now because we have the Sorceress Robe, but for the end game, it's going to be one of our 2 magic users. So for now, it's just going to be used for armor, which is relevant. We also purchased a plate shield from the shield merchant before we warped over to Noble Court. That plate shield, even though it's a very small piece of equipment, seemingly insignificant piece of equipment, the 45 physical defense that it gives will actually be significant for living certain attacks from certain bosses later. So after you get the Sorcerer class is really when you want to start keeping track of your SP, because you're going to want to have enough SP to kill encounters and to kill bosses. So sometimes you might see me check my SP, just flash in and out of the menu just to check my SP. I get this encounter on the way to the dungeon, to the cave, this encounter is extremely uncommon. So when I got this encounter, I was kind of tilted because for some reason I only get this encounter on like really good pace runs. But it was just a minor inconvenience and a minor annoyance. Something else I was doing in Victor's Hollow and in Noble Court was I was getting Curious Blooms. So I also purchased one in Query Quest when we first went there. Curious Bloom is another one of Alfyn's concoct materials. It's going to be used to do some very important concocts that have very good effects. So Curious Blooms are also one of a very limited resource. So we're gonna want to keep track of how many Curious Blooms we have. This screen is another screen where you kind of want to kill the encounter. I was contemplating skipping it, but I decided against it because you have a chance to fail from it. The nice thing about killing bats is that they give you Curious Blooms, so it saves you the trouble of having to pick up extra Curious Blooms later. So this is a very simple fight. You're gonna want to collect Tiger with Tressa here, because she has Snatch, unlike Therion. But if you have minimum damage before you collect, the collect is only a 99% chance. So what I do here is I actually attack with Tressa instead of defending. So defending puts you at the start of the next turn. But here I choose to attack because Therion was going right before Tressa, so I could guarantee the collect since I would have damage, prior damage on Tiger here. So collect's chance is based off the remaining HP that your opponent has. So the lower HP, the higher chance of collect. And boosting collect also increases the chance. But if, let's say, Therion was going, Ophi was going right after Therion, I would have to have defended with Tressa. So in this split, I lost about 24 seconds because, partly because of that extra encounter I got outside. So that was kind of unfortunate, but there's nothing really much I can do about it. But now we're done with Tressa's Chapter 3, we're immediately going to head over to Grandport to finish her Chapter 4. In Grandport, we're going to purchase a quest item known as the Lapis Lazuli. This is a quest item that's going to be used to complete the next part of Kit's quest. And that's also one of the reasons why we do Tressa now. And why we do it before Vanessa, which is Alfyn's Chapter 2 boss. Because we're going to complete the quest after beating Vanessa. So we do Tressa Chapter 4 before Alfyn Chapter 2, so we can get the Lapis Lazuli before we complete the quest. And I'm also going to go to the shop here to buy an Unerring Bracelet. This is an accessory which gives extra 50 accuracy. So Elemental Break is not exactly the most accurate of skills. So having the Unerring Bracelet here is pretty much mandatory because you don't want to be missing your Elemental Break on certain bosses, because some bosses have higher evasion, but you're gonna need to hit Elemental Break on them when they're unbroken. So when an enemy is broken, you cannot miss them. But some of these bosses, you're gonna need to use Elemental Break when they're unbroken. So having the Unerring Bracelet there really helps to ensure that we can hit our Elemental Breaks. And also because Elemental Break's effect doesn't apply if you miss. So this upcoming fight against Esmeralda, you're gonna need to use Elemental Break to apply the debuff and to take off one shield because she's weak to staff. But the equipment menu that I did is one of my favorite menus in this game. So it's very smart, right? So what you did was you optimized Alfyn, and this gives him the Hasty Helm and the Elemental Heavy Armor. So this equipment setup allows him, and the Plate Shield as well. So this equipment setup allows him to lift both attacks from Esmeralda. And the Hasty Helm is also significant because it gives Alfyn more speed, so he's less likely to get crit by Esmeralda. And then the next thing I did was I actually removed the bracelet from Therion. So this might sound very counterintuitive because why would you want to remove HP from a character that is already pretty squishy? So we have to understand what Esmeralda does. So on the first turn, she uses a normal attack, and then she has an attack known as Red Blade. Red Blade's kind of interesting because it acts as a physical attack, but it deals elemental damage. So it can be covered if someone were to be hit while in cover range. It also does fire elemental damage, which is significant because we have the High House Armor on Therion, which decreases fire damage by 25%. So Red Blade, which normally does a lot more damage than normal attack, would deal about the same damage with the High House Armor equipped. So this allows Therion to be put into cover range by both Red Blade and attack, but this only happens if Therion doesn't have the bracelet. So taking the bracelet off there is actually to manipulate Therion's HP, so he will always be put into cover range by both attacks. Something to note actually was that in this case, Therion wasn't put into cover range by Esmeralda's normal attack because he actually had extra levels from the Chubby Kate. So at this level that Therion's at now, the normal attack is a is a roll to put Therion under 30%. But otherwise, this fight is 100% safe. At some higher levels, Ophi also doesn't get put in the cover range by normal attack. But in general, the fight is very safe. I save about 23 seconds here because of a new strat that we are doing. So this is the first run that implemented this strat. What we used to do was we used to get a shield known as the Force Shield from the Grandport Sewers. The Force Shield is one of the best shields in the game. It gives a lot of defense and elemental defense. And it's going to be put on Therion later for survivability. But the problem is that the Force Shield takes about 20 seconds to get. So what we do now is that we give the Adamantine Shield instead to Therion. And this presents like a bunch of problems, right? So the thing is that Adamantine Shield has lower defense, physical defense, than the Force Shield. And this is going to be relevant for some of the bosses. So in order to make up for the missing defense, we give Therion the Nourish S, which we scrutinize in Atlas Dam, as well as the Tough L, which we purchased in Riverford. And then another problem is that with the Force Shield on Therion, normally the Adamantine Shield would be on Alfyn. So this allows Alfyn to live certain attacks as well. But now that the Adamantine Shield has been shifted to Therion, Alfyn cannot survive these attacks anymore. So we have to change up some of the menus to accommodate for that. But overall, this strategy was introduced to save the time of having to pick up the Force Shield. So it just required a bit of just to pick up the Nourish S and a bit of extra menuing. Pick up a few extra nuts and a bit of extra menuing to accommodate for the lack of defense. So right now is a mandatory 8 minutes credit sequence. So after you beat the final chapter of the character that you started with, you have a 8 minutes credits roll, and this is a time that's really good for reading donations if you're in a marathon. If you're a runner, you would usually use this time to take a break and maybe get a snack or something, or use the bathroom. So yeah, there's nothing much that's going on right now, so you can just chill to the music. So something cool about this credit sequence is that it replays every boss that you kill. And there's a jingle at the end of the credits song that's unique to the character that you started with. So this is a good time to explain why we start with Tressa. So I already mentioned that Tressa was one of the fastest characters to start with. By that I meant that she was the fastest character that we can get Evasive Maneuvers with. Another reason is because you actually can't swap characters out of your party until you complete their chapter 4s. And the Cyrus route could start with Cyrus because Cyrus was going to stay in the party for the entire run. But this route doesn't have the option for that because Cyrus is not going to be in our party for the entire run because the sorcerer has because Ophi will be the main sorcerer instead of Cyrus. Right, so we're at the end of the credit sequence, so now we can proceed on with the run. Like I mentioned, the next chapter we'll be doing is Alfyn's chapter 2. And the reason for that is after this chapter, we have to go to the Moonstruck Coast because that's where Kit is. So we go there to complete the next part of Kit's quest. And that's also why we purchased the Lapis Lazuli in Grandport. One of the nice things about doing Esmeralda early as well is that you get because chapter 4 bosses give a lot of XP and JP, so it's really beneficial to finish chapter 4 early so you can get a lot of JP, so you can get very powerful skills earlier than if you were to do them afterwards or later in the run. And Esmeralda is one of the easier bosses to do early, that's why we do that. So Vanessa's a pretty simple fight. You're gonna see this formula a lot. Just Peacock Ophi, donate BP to her, Elemental Break, and then kill the ads on turn 2, and then kill on turn 3. So now that we're done with Alphyn's Chapter 2, now we're gonna head over to Moonstruck Coast to do the next part of Kit's quest. And while we're there, we're also going to steal a piece of equipment known as the Primeval Robe. So the Primeval Robe is something that we're just going to use for armor now, but it also gives extra SP, which will be relevant for later because we're going to run it on Therion for Galdera because he's going to need the extra max SP for his skills. So that's something to keep in mind for later, but for now we're just going to use it for armor. So now we can finally finish Therion's Chapter 2. The reason why we do Therion's Chapter 2 now, as opposed to in the Cyrus route where you would do it before Esmeralda, is because finishing Therion's chapters actually puts you back at Boulderfall. And if you recall, finishing Tressa's chapters gives you access to another magic nut, and this magic nut can be obtained in Boulderfall. So we want to get it right after finishing Therion's Chapter 2 now, because it gives us a free warp back to Boulderfall. So this encounter you usually get because the screen is very long. Sometimes you can make it past without an encounter, but I'm not too upset about getting this encounter because you get it most of the time. So again with Orlick, it's just the same formula that we've been using for Vanessa and Omar. One thing to note about this fight though is that on turn 2 I'm going to try to heal Ophi's SP with Alfyn. And because she's at a level where she has enough SP to finish this fight and then have just enough SP for the next fight, which is Gideon. Also, one of the reasons why we have to do Orlick now is because, like I said, Ophi has lower elemental attack than than Cyrus. So we have to do her after Esmeralda because we have extra levels, so she will have extra damage. Otherwise, Orlick becomes a range, and if you don't hit the range, Orlick will summon an ad, which has a lot of HP, so it will lose you a lot of time. But now that we're back in Borderfall, we can finally go and get the magic nut that I've been talking about. And while we're here, we are also going to go to the tavern to get Cyrus back into the party so we can proceed on with his chapters. So in this menu, we give a bracelet to Therion because he's gonna want some extra bulk. And then we take the shield off of Tressa and give it to Cyrus along with the other pieces of equipment, like the Primeval Robe. And we want the necklace on Cyrus as well, so we gave the bracelet to Tressa to take out the necklace. Cyrus is still very squishy. I think he's the squishiest character in Octopath, so you're gonna want all the equipment on him to make him less likely to die. Because his chapter 3 fight is one of the scarier fights in this game. And it could be really bad if they focus down Cyrus. So you're gonna want to give him as much defense and HP as you can. In fact, even with this equipment setup, he can still die. So I do a nut menu here before Gideon. It's actually optional. You can do this nut menu later. But I choose to do it here because it saves me a few inputs on Gideon. So Gideon's one of the bosses with higher evasion as well, so it's kind of similar to Esmeralda. So this is also one of the fights where you want the unerring bracelet for. So again, the same formula. You're gonna want to heal Cyrus either in this fight or before. If Ophi has enough SP for this fight, it's faster to heal Cyrus in this fight instead of going to the menu to heal him. The reason why you want to heal Cyrus is because he dies if Gideon hits him. Also on turn 3, sometimes if Ophi is like after Gideon, he uses an AoE attack which deals like quite a bit of damage to your party. And especially for Cyrus. Yeah, but other than that, the fight is like really free. So I can use Ignis here. If I didn't use the Magic Nut before Gideon, I would have to use Lux. But with the Magic Nut, I deal just enough damage so I can save a few inputs going to Lux by using Ignis instead. So that's Cyrus's chapter 2. So the next chapter we're gonna do is Cyrus's chapter 3. And like I said, this fight is one of the scarier fights. So Yvonne himself deals a lot of damage. And he has 2 adds, both of which can use a AoE wind attack called Tornado, which also deals a lot of damage. And you also don't have cover for this fight, so this is one of the differences between the Cyrus route. So the Cyrus route has Alfyn for this fight instead of Ophi, and Alfyn has cover, so he can protect some of your characters if they were to be hit when under 30% HP. So in this fight, we have no Alfyn, so no cover. We have a squishier Cyrus. And we have Yvonne and his adds that deal a lot of damage. So this fight is one of the scarier fights. And my PB before this actually had, I think, Therion die to the adds. That's why I started giving the bracelet to Therion. So it gives him a higher chance of being able to survive. And something that I did in a menu as well before this was I taught 2 more sorcerer skills to Ophi, and this unlocks some pretty important support skills. So the first of which is Stronger Strikes. Stronger Strikes increases your damage done to unbroken enemies if you hit them for their weakness from 1.3 times to 1.5 times. And then the next support skill that we learned was Elemental Aid. Elemental Aid is a support skill which gives all your elemental skills 1.5 times increase in damage at the cost of doubling the SP cost. So now that we have Elemental Aid, we're gonna need a lot more SP for the fights. So we're gonna want to be very aware of how much SP we have. But the 1.5 times damage multiplier is just too good to pass up. It's definitely worth the extra SP cost. I get this encounter here, which you do get sometimes. So it's a bit annoying because chapter 3 encounters you aren't guaranteed to escape, and this isn't an encounter which you normally kill. But fortunately for me, I do run away from it. So coming up is Yvonne. So I'm really hoping for a good fight here. I don't want them to focus down either Cyrus or Therion. So other than that, the fight is very free. You just need them to not gang up on people. Since Cyrus is going first on the next turn, I chose to attack Yvonne here. Cyrus can actually miss Yvonne, so I'm trying to get in as many hits as I can. So Yvonne hits into Tressa, which means that this fight is free. So now you just break Yvonne and kill the adds. And then you donate BP so Ophi can kill on the next turn. So if you're at a lower level, this fight is actually a range. So what you do is you actually use 2 spells and an L stone to kill Yvonne. But at lower levels, it is a range, so you might need like an M stone or an S stone. We also collect Yvonne because he's a convenient source of money. We're gonna need the money for an upcoming purchase, which I will get into later. So that's one of the reasons why we have to collect Yvonne here. So I saved about 16 seconds, which is pretty decent because my PB before that gets a very bad fight. But it could have been more if I didn't get that encounter before Yvonne. So coming up now is one of the recent strats that we introduced along with the 4 shields kit. So we call this early Hanet. And this is something that has been implemented in the Cyrus route for quite some time already. The idea is that there is a second line of side quest which you have to do apart from Kit's quest to unlock Galdera. So this is Alphys's side quest. And in order to start Alphys' side quest, you have to challenge Cyrus with either Ulbrich or H'aanit's path actions. And then you have to beat him in a battle. So the old route used to do Alphys' side quest much later in the run. And would use Ulbrich to challenge Alphys instead. The problem is that the second part of Alphys' side quest, after you challenge him, you have to do a second part of the side quest in Saintsbridge. And doing Alphys' side quest later means you have to go to Saintsbridge multiple times. Because right after this, we're going to want to go to Saintsbridge to do Alphyn's Chapter 3. So early H'aanit allows you to do everything in one go, essentially. And for the longest time, we didn't know of a good way to do this, because what the Cyrus route does is that it swaps Tressa out of the party for H'aanit, and then uses H'aanit to provoke Alphys, and then once you're done with that, you can swap H'aanit back out for Tressa. But the difference in this route is that you don't have Alfyn in the party. In Cyrus route, you already had Alfyn in the party. But for this route, you need Alfyn in the party as well, on top of H'aanit. So for the longest time, we didn't really know of a good way to do early H'aanit because we just don't have the space in our party. But the funny thing is that we actually overlooked a very simple mechanic, in that when you're recruiting characters, you can also swap out other party members. So one day I just realized that we can actually just put Alfyn in the party by swapping Tressa out. And this allows us to do the same early H'aanit strats as the Galdera, as the Cyrus route. So this allows us to save a bunch of time in Saintsbridge later. So you understand what I mean when we get to Saintsbridge. But basically just know that there are a bunch of errands that we have to do alongside doing our Alfyn story later. So now that we got H'aanit, we're going to go and provoke Alphys. So provoke and challenge are path actions that allow you to bring NPCs into battle. And for the speedrun, we're just going to use it to complete quests and to do the stories. This is the only provoke that you have to do as part of like non-story stuff. And Alphys here, he goes down to either a Fire Larch or a Shadow Larch, so that's why you want to conserve your stones for him. For H'aanit's chapters in particular, you're gonna need a lot of stones to do the provokes. So you're gonna need to conserve your stones and be aware of how many stones you have in your inventory. So you can pick up like extra stones if you need it, or you can save stones if you are short on stones. So now that we're in Saintsbridge, we're just gonna do first part of Alfyn's story. It's kind of like Therion's Chapter 2, where you have like a lot of cutscenes in the first and second screen, so you're gonna do a lot of running around. So you're gonna see me warp in and out of Saintsbridge while I'm doing this. So now we're gonna go to Wellspring, and we're gonna start Therion's Chapter 2. And while we're here, we have to do a mandatory steal in the tavern. And while we're there, we are going to get Tressa back into the party. So you're going to see me fall behind now because my PB uses the old route, which did Hanet late. So I'm gonna fall a few minutes behind just because I'm doing things earlier. But that's all good because we will save time later on. So after this cutscene outside the black market, we actually have to do a steal. We can steal the attendant's mask here, but it's a really low chance and it's not worth it to do so. So instead what we do is we want to go back to Wellspring in order to steal the black market inventory from the tavern keeper, which is a guaranteed 100%. But before that, we're going to go back to Saintsbridge and we're going to proceed with Alfyn's story. And this is what I mean by doing everything at once. So in the old route, you wouldn't do Alphys' side quest now. You have to come back to Saintsbridge later just to do the side quest. And you're going to have to run all the way to the second screen again, because once you inquire Alphys there, you have to go to you have to talk to a lady outside the church. So early Hanet allows you to do everything in one shot, because when you're on the second screen doing Alfyn's story now, right afterwards you can just run to the church to complete Alphys' side quest. And something interesting about that cutscene there, it's a one text cutscene. You can skip it if you clear the text box, but it gives a very slow fade out. So what I do is I actually just hold B to skip it instead of pressing A. So now we complete Alphys' side quest and we purchase a staff known as the Battle Tested Staff or BT Staff from the bishop in the church here. And the bishop here, he sells the BT Staff, which is one of the strongest staffs in this game. I believe it is the staff with the highest elemental attack in this game. But compared to the knowledge stuff, it doesn't give that increase in speed. But that's fine, because for some of the upcoming fights, we want Ophi to be slow. So we're going to use the battle-tested staff for fights where we either need the extra firepower and or we want Ophi to be slow. So right after stealing the black market inventory, we can enter the black market now, and now we have to do this mandatory encounter before Therion. We keep the knowledge stuff on Ophi for this encounter just so she can go earlier and kill this encounter. But right after this encounter, we're going to want Ophi to be slow for the next fight, so we're going to give her the battle-tested staff. So this next menu is different from the original route just because we did early Hanet and then our party kind of changed a bit, and also because we skipped the Force Shield. So we would normally equip Therion with the Force Shield in this menu, but since we don't have the Force Shield anymore, we have to give him the Adamantine Shield. So in this menu, I give Therion the Gideon's Dagger and the Adamantine Shield, and then I give him I'm supposed to give him 2 bracelets, but I make a mistake here, so I realize it now. So I give Therion both bracelets, and then I give Alfyn the Badge of Friendship. So the reason why I give Therion the Gideon's Dagger is because it gives him an increase in speed. And for the upcoming fights, I'm going to want Therion to go before Ophi on one of the turns. So giving him the Gideon's Dagger gives Therion a bigger chance of him going first before Ophi. And for some of these fights, it's gonna matter quite a bit, because it's gonna give us more leeway to recover these fights in case something goes wrong. So I personally like the Gideon's Dagger a lot, although I know some runners prefer not to use it. And this is one of the fights where we want Ophi to be slow. We want her to be slow so we can get buffs on her before she uses her spell. And also so we can donate BP to her. Gareth here doesn't have a lot of HP. He has about 39,000 HP, which is really low for a chapter 3 boss. So I know that the spell here will do about 30,000 damage. So if I hit anywhere in the ballpark of about 10,000 damage, I know I'm good. So I'm kind of just like eyeballing the damage that I'm doing. But after Gareth, now we are going to do our second secret job boss of this run. This menu is also a bit different. Like I said, Alfyn doesn't have the Adamantine shield anymore, so we have to teach him a skill known as Hang Tough. And Hang Tough is a skill where if you're above 30% HP and were to be killed by an attack, you would be left with 1 HP. So this is a very strong skill which gives a lot of squishier characters the ability to survive attacks which they normally wouldn't. And we're giving this to Alfyn because in one of the upcoming fights later, he's not going to be able to live an attack because he doesn't have the Adamantine shield because it's on Therion. So we give it to Alfyn now because it's a convenient time to do so since we're in the job menu anyway. But this upcoming fight is Steora. Steora is one of the hardest bosses in this run because there is a lot of variance to this fight. So essentially what's going to happen is that on turn 1, Steora is always going to confuse someone. And you're going to want to try to... you're going to need to heal this confusion off before... as soon as possible. Because not only can your confused characters not do anything when you need them to, but they also have a chance of attacking into Steora. And since Steora gives herself counter, if they attack into Steora, they will die. There's a lot to do in this fight. You have to apply Leg Hold onto Steora. Leg Hold is a condition that puts your opponents at the end, makes your opponents move last. So you can either do this with Leg Hold Trap, or you can do it with one of Alfyn's concocts. And this concoct uses a Curious Bloom, which is why you kind of want to manage the number of Curious Blooms you have. If you have to use a lot of the Curious Blooms in some of these fights and you don't have enough for later, you're gonna need to get extra ones. But basically you need to get Alfrix on Ophi. Alfrix is a divine skill, which is the last skill that can only be unlocked after you learn every single skill in a job. And divine skills are extremely powerful and take a lot of JP to learn, which is why we only got it now. But we need it on... we want it now because what Alfrix does is that any skill that you use, you can cast it for free again immediately afterwards. So right now, Ignis Ardere, which normally does 3 hits, will do 6 hits because we use it twice. And this is sort of a way to get around the damage cap because right now our damage is capped at 9,999. And we don't have the JP to learn the skill that allows us to break the damage cap just yet, so we get around that by dealing more hits instead. So Steora changes her shields after the first break, and she can give herself either 4, 8, or 12 shields. So depending on how many shields she gives herself, you have to do a different fight. I get an 8 shield pattern, which is alright. The 12 shield pattern is the one you don't want to see because it's the hardest one. So any 8 shields and 4 shields are both fine. But that's the fight where we usually use the Revitalizing Gem, so we use it to give Ophi max BP, SP, and HP. You want to heal everyone to full. You want to make sure everyone's at full before the end of the first break because Steora is going to use an AoE attack called Shooting Star, which hits everyone for a lot of damage. So you're going to want to heal the person that took damage on the first turn. And from there, it's just a matter of using a lot of spells until steroid goes down. So after beating Stera, you unlock the Starseer job. The Starseer job is not a job that you actually use for its attacks. It's pretty underwhelming when it comes to its actual skills, but it has some of the best support skills in this game. So we immediately teach Alfyn a few Starseer skills to unlock 2 support skills, the first of which is Hard Worker, which is basically a Badge of Friendship, except it's in a support skill. And this stacks with Badge of Friendship, so now instead of getting 1.5 times the amount of JP that we would normally get, we would get 2 times the amount of JP. And the next support skill we got in Alfyn is called Boost Start. So Boost Start gives your characters 2 BP at the start of every battle instead of 1. And this might not seem like a lot, but for this speedrun it really matters because essentially it gives you access to divine skills on turn 2. So divine skills are really powerful skills that can only be used at with free BP. So being able to get 1 turn earlier access to divine skills is really, really good. Nothing much to say about this fight. Sometimes you can't like hold with Miguel, which is fine. You just have to take a few attacks from Miguel, which won't kill you. But what you want to do is you just want to 2-turn Miguel with Elemental Break, Peacock Shot, and Alfrix. And this is one of the fights where you really start to see how strong the Sorcerer class can be. We're kind of just flexing all our buffs and all our damage stacks on Miguel right now because we kill him without... We hit damage cap on him without even breaking him. So now that we're done with Alfyn's chapter 3, now we're going to do his chapter 4. So Alfyn's chapters have a lot of cutscenes. This is also one of them. But this upcoming boss fight against Ogre Eagle, it's also kind of like Thera, it's one of the trickier fights because Ogre Eagle can also status people. And it's also one of the fights like Stera where you want Ophi to be slow. Because you want... Because the thing is that if Therion's if Therion is after Ophi on turn 2, you would need to defend with Therion, which gives you 1 less character you can use to recover fights in case you get statused. So if Therion is before Ophi on turn 2, you don't need to defend. You can use him to palm himself or use another character to do that. And then Therion's turn will be freed up. Just in case you have to heal. So Ogre Eagle's also one of the fights where you might need to use Curious Blooms. So I already mentioned the concoct that can apply lick hold. That's something you can do on Ogre Eagle. Sometimes you might also want to use this concoct, which is Soothing Dust plus Curious Bloom. So you can use this if Ophi's already going before Eagle on turn 2. Otherwise, you have to lick hold with Alfyn. But what the Soothing Dust plus Curious Bloom allows you to do is it prevents status ailments for the entire party. So it's a nice thing you can do if you got some good turn order, so you can ensure that you don't get status. But after Ogre Eagle, you're gonna need 2 Curious Blooms. So you're gonna want to keep track of how many Curious Blooms you have. And you can steal one in Clearbrook right after Alfyn's Chapter 4. Just in case you don't have enough. So here I need to let hold Eagle because Ophi's going last. I do get status. So if I didn't get status there, I could do a faster fight with Elemental Break, but here I have to wake Alfyn up. But this fight is still this fight is still fine. I didn't Ogre Eagle didn't status the wrong person. I was able to heal the status off in time, so we're all good. And I'm able to do this fight without spending a lot of resources. So if you get some pretty bad turn orders, you might have to get some extra damage on Eagle with like Amputation and like an Elstone or something. But because I was able to get BP to Ophi before she attacked, I'm able to just use spells to kill Ogre Eagle instead. And after Ogre Eagle, you're gonna want to notice your JP. So you're gonna need at least 4,630 JP because that's the amount of JP that you need to learn Surpassing Power, which is the skill that's gonna allow you to break the damage cap. So right after Ogre Eagle, we can start to hit above 10,000 damage. So I'm at 5,000 JP, which means that I'm in a really good position, because normally you'd be at about 4,007 to 4,008. So the fact that I'm at 5,000 JP means that I can skip having to kill the encounter inside the Warbringer Shrine, which is the next place where we're going. And by doing usually when you're in the Warbringer Shrine, you would get the 30,000 leaves, which is there. But if you skip the 30,000 leaves, you have a chance of skipping the encounter. So that's what I'm gonna do. So we also give the second divine skill now to Tressa, Elephant's Enlightenment. Elephant's is a skill that takes an AoE attack and focuses on one target and doubles the damage. And this works even if there's only one enemy. So against bosses, it's kind of like just a free 2x multiplier. And again, we teach now that we have Surpassing Power, we can use Elephants. There wasn't a point in teaching Elephants before because we wouldn't have been able to hit above the damage cap anyway. So now that we have Surpassing Power, we can really start to see how strong the Sorcerer can be with all the buffs. So like I said, I'm going to try to skip this encounter by skipping the 30,000 leaf chest. But I get the encounter just before Winterhill, so a bit annoying. I feel like every time I'm on a good pace and I want to skip this encounter, I don't. But the good thing is that Ophi went first, which is kind of rare because she has the BT stuff and it's kind of slow. So I was able to kill this encounter pretty quickly. So Winterhill is a fight that you need everyone to be at full HP for. Winterhill does two things on the first turn. First is a normal attack, and the second is a very strong attack called Garagaras, which has a chance of poisoning as well. So it's very dangerous, and basically everyone is geared up to survive. That's why you need the plate shield on Ophi. It's for her to just survive Yadagaras. And Alfyn used to be able to survive this fight, but without the Adamantine shield, he needs Hang Tough to survive. So this is the fight which we teach Alfyn Hang Tough for. And this is also the fight where the Force Shield is important for Therion, but since we have the Adamantine Shield, we needed the extra defense and HP to make up for the missing physical defense. And on turn 2, worst case, you have to defend with both Therion and Tressa to get them before Ophi on turn 3. And then you have to peek out with Alfyn. So if any one of them are before Ophi on turn 2 and turn 3, you want to use them to break Winterhild instead. Otherwise, you would have to use Elemental Break to break Winterhild, which is not ideal because, for one, we don't have the Unerring Bracelet for this fight. And Winterhild also has higher evasion, and Elemental Break itself is already not a very accurate move, so it actually has a chance of missing Winterhild. And if you do miss Winterhild, it's going to lose you a lot of time. So definitely want to try to break Winterhild if you can with another character, if turn order allows. But you can really see how strong the Sorcerer is now. We stack all the buffs onto Ophi and just white Winterhild in 3 turns. And beating Winterhild gives us access to the War Master job, which we immediately use to learn a support skill known as Extra Experience. So we give that to Therion because not only do we need extra JP, but we also need extra XP to get enough levels on our characters. So this is important because there's a steal in Therion's Chapter 4 that is 55% at level 45 and 15% at level 44. So that's why you want to hit level 45 to give yourself a much better chance of hitting this steal. The levels are also important because every level that you gain, you actually deal more damage because the damage you deal is also based on a hidden multiplier based on your level. And this is actually going to be crucial for the final boss, Galdera. So because I killed the encounter in the Warbringer Shrine, I was still super ahead on JP and XP. So that's why I decided to skip the Everhold encounter. So normally I would kill the encounter with the birds there. But since I had extra XP and JP, I could skip it. So I'm like super ahead now. I'm gonna save like a lot of time on this split. Because normally we would kill the encounter and Ophi usually goes like pretty late. So something about this fight is that you have to use Tressa to break Balagar, which means she can't defend on turn 2. So you have to use Alfyn to move Tressa. So if Tressa's going right after Ophi, you can use a skill known as the Panther Dance, which puts her right before. But if Tressa's like going all the way dead last, you have to use a Concoct, which is Soothing Seed plus Curious Bloom, which moves Tressa all the way to the front of the next turn. And this is the last fight where you really need the Curious Blooms for. And you really don't want to be in a situation where you don't have any Curious Blooms and you're forced to use the Curious Bloom Concoct. So that's why you really want to keep track of your Curious Blooms. But this fight is the last fight where you are tight on Curious Blooms. The next fight where you need it, you have ready access to one before that. So I golded this split by, I think... I'm not sure how much I golded this split by, but I did save about 16 seconds over my PB. Which is really big. Again, I look like I'm still behind at the moment, but I'm gonna save all this. I'm gonna gain all the time back, right after all breaks chapters, because that's normally when my PB picked up Hanan and did Alphys' side quests. So in this menu, I take out the speed equipments from Therion because I don't need him to be faster anymore. And then I do a menu Tressa, I gave her the High House's armor. The reasoning for this is because I want the elemental heavy armor off of her so I can make some of the menus later a bit easier. But I actually get punished for this. So I will explain this later. But basically just know that giving High House's armor to Tressa there was not a good decision. And I will be punished for that later. And this was a mistake that was made more so due to routing error than it was an execution error. So immediately after this run, I went to change up the menu. Again, this is the first run that I'm doing with these strats, this is the first run that anyone has ever done with these new strats. So it's kind of still a work in progress at this point. So this run really helped me to solidify the menus. So yeah, I lost a bunch of time here, I think, because my menuing was pretty slow. So now we're going to do all break chapters. This next menu here, since Alfyn was swapped out of the party, we don't have Hardworker anymore. We didn't need it for Gaston because he doesn't give a lot of JP anyway. But for this upcoming section, we're going to want Hardworker on one of our characters. So we're going to give the Sorcerer jobs to Therion now. We're going to give Ulbrich hired help because he's going to use that for his story. And then we're going to give the Dancer to Tressa. So we're going to want hired help on Ulbrich because for his story, he needs to do certain challenges. And the nice thing about the challenges is that you're able to use your skills. So using hired help allows you to one turn a lot of these two challenges here. And also allows you to kill the later challenges a lot faster than normal. So Ulbrich's really just flexing his wallet here on these guys. 30,000 per use of veterans, but it really saves a lot of time compared to the other strats. You can break these guys and use a soulstone, but that takes a lot of time and also uses a soulstone. So using hired help veterans is a much more efficient way to do this. So I get the exotic garb, which is a drop from this NPC here. And this is the equipment that's going to punish me because the exotic garb is an equipment that restores SP at the end of every turn. And it has a few seconds of animation. And it also doesn't give a lot of defense. So the problem with the exotic garb is that it has a higher priority when being optimized than the elemental heavy armor, which I have in my inventory right now. So my intention was to get the elemental heavy armor when I was optimizing onto Ulbrich when I was optimizing him. But now that I have the exotic garb, I have to take it off. If not, Ulbrich would be a lot squishier and also of the extra animation. Okay, so one thing about that Victorino fight, there's an equipment menu that you can do before him, but I usually do it afterwards because uh, it's more beneficial to have Ophi with the knowledge staff and going first in that encounter, in that fight. So if Ophi went first, you would use the Ventus plus Wind L. If Ophi went like second or something, you would just give her BP. And yeah, it's a lot faster than having Ophi go last. So here I noticed that I have the exotic garb on all break. So I realized that I need to take it off after this fight. The arena fights themselves are pretty simple. You just need to give Ophi BP and you can just use a spell to kill them. So right now I have to take off the exotic garb. So pretty annoying. And yeah, I lose a bunch of time in this chapter just because of this. So I'm getting punished pretty badly now for giving the High House's armor. So right after this run, I changed the menu so that I would have the High House's armor in the inventory instead. So it would always be optimized onto any character. And it's not just relevant for all break chapters because the characters that we recruit later also appreciate the armor. And if you have the exotic garb on them, they are also going to suffer, and you're also going to have to unequip them. So the arena is also where you need the extra power from the BT staff as well as the Ophi being slow, so you can give her BP and one turn these fights. So this fight is an so the first two fights against Joshua and Archibald, like if Ophi is first, you would have to defend with her because there's no other way of killing them. She doesn't have enough damage. And this fight as well, if Ophi is first, it's really bad because then you probably have to use Elfrix to kill Gustav instead. But since Ophi was last, I could use Ignis here. I could use 2 Ignises instead, which is a lot faster. I made a slight mistake here of using Ignis times 4 when I really should have used Ignis times 3. This is because I was unsure whether the ads would take less damage if they use body armor or shield bash. But it only increases their physical defense, so I didn't need to go times 4 there. So yeah, I lost 15 seconds because of the slow menuing and my fights in this chapter just being slower in general. And now we warp over to Saint's Bridge because there's a nut here we have to purchase. So this nut only spawns here, I think, after you finish... this NPC only spawns here after you finish Alfyn's chapter 4, I think. So you definitely need to pick up this Fortifying L because you're going to need the damage on Therion. So we go there after All Break chapter 2 so we can save having to run back to the first screen. So now we give the knowledge stuff back onto Ophi because for pretty much the next sections, we're going to want Ophi to go faster instead, and we don't need the extra damage from the BT staff anymore. So there, in Olbrich chapter 3, there are 2 encounters which you have to kill. And you need to kill them with Ophi. If Ophi goes last, you're going to lose like 20 seconds per fight. So that's one of the big reasons why you need knowledge stuff on Ophi now. And also for the upcoming boss fight, the boss likes to use this attack on turn 2, which can stun people. And if you have a slow Ophi that's going after the boss and the boss stuns Ophi, that's really, really bad. So the knowledge stuff is a lot more beneficial for these fights. So yeah, these are the fights where you need Ophi to go first. Also nice that I leveled off Gustav. If you level off Gustav, you have enough SP to do both of these fights and then the upcoming boss fight without having to heal your SP. So for this upcoming fight, if you have Ophi before Therion on the first turn, you can defend with Ophi and then defend with Therion. So that Therion will go before Ophi on the next turn. And then you can Palm S Ophi to and use Alfric's Tonitrus with Peacock. Otherwise, if you don't use a Palm S on Ophi, you have to use Elemental Break. So both of those are fine. But defend is slightly faster. Defend into Palm S is slightly faster. So I get Ophi before Therion on turn 1, so I can do the defend Palm S strat. And the ads here, they can't kill you, but if they do manage to attack you, they have this text box that says the Lizardman Chief is protected by one of its own. And it's like a few seconds, so it's just it's just time loss if that happens. So you don't want to see the ads before Ophi, essentially. So now that we're done with Lizard King, we're gonna challenge one of Ulbricht's old pals, Erhardt, who is supposedly one of the strongest swordsmen in the land. So we just throw a stone at Erhardt, and then we defend. And then we just summon a bunch of vets. So yeah, that's one of the toughest swordsmen in the entire continent. Alright, so Ulbricht's Chapter 4. Nothing much to say right now. On the second screen, you're gonna get a cutscene, and then you have to run back to the first screen. So, if you can guess, we are going to warp somewhere else. And this time we're gonna go to Sunshade to start a quest by talking to an NPC. A lot of the post-game quests are only unlocked, can only be done after you talk to the NPCs. So that's why we have to go to Sunshade now to talk to this guy, because it spawns another NPC in Marceline which we have to guide. So we have to do it now because right after Ulbricht's chapters we're going to pick up Hanet and then go to Marceline for Hanet's Chapter 4. So we don't have an opportunity to talk to that NPC before any time before that, apart from now. So remember that Erhardt was supposed to be like one of the toughest swordsmen in the land, and we killed him with we beat him with the stone and one set of vets. Well, there's like this random dude that's just walking around the street with a red hat, and you need 2 sets of vets to kill him. Or not kill, you kind of just beat him up with 2 sets of vets, but kind of funny how, like, just a random dude is stronger than one of the best swordsmen in the land. So for this upcoming menu, this is one of the JP thresholds you have to hit. So before that was the surpassing power one. For this one, you need 8,000 JP on both Ophi and Tressa. And this is to learn their Sorcerer skills. So this gives them boost start as well as BP Eater. BP Eater is just a busted support skill. What it does is that it gives you a 1.5 times boost to any skill that you boost. So it's essentially an unconditional 1.5 times multiplier to damage. So a no drawback 1.5 times multiplier to damage, because every time you want to deal damage, you're pretty much going to boost anyway, right? So BP Eater really is just probably the most busted support skill when it comes to damage in this game. So really one of the main selling points of Starseer, even though we don't use it for the skills, for the base skills, we use it for the support skills. And BP Eater is going to be on every one of our damage dealing characters later. So now we're in the Mans, we actually can just warp back to Riverford, and it's actually closer this way, and it saves us the trouble. If we run all the way to the boss Werner from there, we would have gotten an encounter, maybe even two. But by warping back to Riverford, we can skip the encounter. If you're unlucky, you can still get one, but usually you skip the encounter. So along with BP Eater and Boost Start, we can now start a 2-turn a lot of the bosses that would otherwise take 3 turns. We also gave Olbrich Hang Tough and the Thief job. We gave him the Thief job because the dagger is going to be useful for breaking this upcoming boss. And I get a pretty good turn order, so I can break him right now. And he doesn't attack. So Werner has this annoying property where he's able to terror anyone with his attack. So if someone gets terrored, they are unable to boost and they stop gaining BP at the end of every turn. So that's very annoying because if someone does get terrored, you have to heal it off and then you have to delay your kill until turn 3. But since I was able to break him before he even attacked, I was able to guarantee that I can kill him on turn 2. So I got a very good Werner fight there. I golded that split. And this next split is where we can save all of the time back, because normally after Werner you would do the Alphys' side quest. You would do Gisarma, recruit recruit Hanet, do Gisarma, and then do Alphys' side quest. So we're gonna save a lot of time here. I'm gonna steal a speed accessory. So we're gonna deck Olbrich out with a lot of speed equipment for the end game. And this is for the final fight against Galdera. You're gonna want Therion to ideally go before Therion. You're gonna want Olbrich to ideally go before Therion. And I'll try to explain that later. But that's also one of the reasons why we give Olbrich the Thief job to unlock a support skill on this Fleetfoot, which also gives him more speed. And now we have to run a bunch of errands before we continue on with Hanet's story. So we come to Goldshore and we go to the tavern to swap Alfyn back into the party, because we need to inquire the bishop here to complete a quest in Wellspring. And this quest gives us a captain's badge, which is like a friendship badge except for XP. And again, we're going to need the extra XP. While we're here, we also purchased the BT Blade. And the BT Blade is a very interesting sword. It's one of the best swords in the game, and it also gives all your physical damage skills an extra 30% increase in damage. and attacks as well. So it just gives an extra 30% increase to all your physical damage. And if you recall, we were setting Therion up to be like a super physical attack, like a super physical attacker later. So this is gonna go on him. We also want Hana in the party so that when we go to Stoneguard, we can start her chapter immediately instead of having to go to the tavern. And once we're here, we get Therion back into the party, and then we do this equipment menu. So let's say if we were short on stones now, we would give this item known as the Lizard King's Axe, which we picked up from Lizardman Chief, to Hanet. The Lizard King Axe is the first item, the first weapon that we get that boosts your damage done by a specific element. So the Lizard King's Axe boosts your thunder damage by 30%, and this also applies to soul stones. So for some of Han's provokes, you're going to need to use certain soul stones that hit for an enemy's weakness. Like for this fight, you need fire soul stone. But if you don't have enough fire soul stones, you can use the Lizard King's Axe with a thunder soul stone, which deals the same amount of damage as a fire soul stone here. But because I had a lot of stones, I didn't need the extra, I didn't need the Lizard King's Axe, so I decided just to not equip it. So in that menu, we also gave Therion the BT Blade. We're gonna give him the BT Blade because he's gonna use it to fix some of the ranges for the upcoming fights, because we're not gonna deal enough damage with just our spells. We're gonna come up just a bit short, so we're gonna use the BT Blade to deal the remaining damage. So now we purchased the double tomahawk from Archibald here. This is the reason why we do Hanet after Allbreak, because after Allbreak chapters, Archibald spawns in Stoneguard. And we want the double tomahawk because it's an axe that deals 2 hits instead of 1. And this is going to be crucial for the phase 1 of the Galdera fight, and also the gauntlet before Galdera, because a lot of the bosses there are weak to axe. And Galdera, the phase 1 itself is weak to axe as well, and has 8 shields. So at a full boost, the double tomahawk will deal exactly the number of hits that we need to break it. So for this provoke as well, you need either a light soulstone or a fire soulstone. Otherwise, you can use a thunder soulstone with the Lizard King's Axe. And then for Hanet's chapter 3, you're gonna need some shadow soulstones. So it's really what you want to Hanet's chapters are what you need to conserve your fire and shadow soulstones for. So Lord of the Forest here has an interesting property where if you kill it, it has adds, but if you kill it, the adds die as well. Normally this isn't the case because for normal bosses, if you kill them, their adds don't die. But because Lord of the Forest has this property, we can just focus it down with Alphyn's and Ignis. And we use the BT Blade here just to deal the remaining damage. We're also using Alphyn's instead of Ignis because with Alphyn's with Alfrix you had to cast a spell twice to deal the same number of damage, so it saves animation time. So now we steal another fortifying nut, which is also for Therion. Now we're going to finish Han's chapter 2, and we're going to move on to her chapter 3. So this upcoming provoke is where we need the shadow stones for. So late here, he has an attack known as Panic Slash, which has a chance of confusing you. So if he confuses you, it's kind of annoying because you lose a bit of time. I blind him, which is pretty nice. But then he hits through blindness and confuses me. But the good thing is he did snap me out, so not too bad. You aren't really at the risk of dying to this fight. It's just time loss if you get confused and then lose a bunch of turns. He has this really slow attack called Dagger Storm. So yeah, if you get confused and then he uses Dagger Storm, then it's just kind of a time loss. And Hanit also has the Gustav shoot on her now, which increases her evasion. So the fact that Alaic hit through blindness and Gustav shield is pretty amazing. The screen is actually one of the longest screens that you run through, so you're actually very likely to get an encounter here. So the fact that I skipped it was pretty good. My PB did get it, so I'll be able to save some time here. And as you can see, after the Lord of the Forest split, I essentially just gained all the time that I lost back when I did Gisarmar first. The dragons here, kind of a simple fight. You just use Elemental Break and then Elephants. And in a lot of these fights, you can really see like Ophi being in the first slot is really beneficial because a lot of times you want to defend to get Tressa or Therion before Ophi, and then the cursor resets to Ophi, so you can just you don't have to reset. You don't have to move the cursor again to use Elephants or Elfrics. So this upcoming split, the Red Eye split, is a split with quite a bit of variance. Not because of the boss itself, but rather because the two screens leading up to the boss are really long, and usually you will get an encounter. And since it's a chapter 4 encounter, if you try to run, you don't usually, sometimes you might fail. And if you fail multiple escapes, it's really slow. We usually try to kill one encounter here, because we're gonna need it for XP and JP. And since I'm on a very good pace here, I'm thinking to myself, I would probably kill both encounters if I get them. So that's just something I'm thinking now. You're gonna want to take typically one Hanit for encounter and then one encounter later in Prim Free. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe I could take two encounters here and then I will run from the Prim Free encounter later. And now that we're in Marceline, we can guide Maruf here. So this is one of the NPCs that you have to guide. And for the Cyrus route, you have to allure with Prim because Ophi isn't at a high enough level. And this allure would be 32%. And also the fact that the Cyrus route has to do this allure like right after towards the end of the run, instead of when you're first in Marcelim. Because when you're in Marcelim during that time in the Cyrus route, you don't have Prim in your party, so you can only guide Allure Maruf after you have Prim in your party. So you do save a bit of time here as well, because you don't have to warp back to Marcelim just for Maruf. I skipped the encounter on the first screen, which is really good. So that's always a relief, because typically you only want to take one encounter here, and ideally you skip the other one or run from it. So on the second screen, I'll probably get an encounter and I'll probably kill it. So for this fight, both Therion and Tressa can live 2 hits from Red Eye. So Ophi and Hanet have a chance of dying if Red Eye hits them both twice. Yeah, or any of them twice. So the fact that he hit into Therion means that I'm safe. So if Red Eye does kill someone, you just have to delay the break until turn 2, and then you kill on turn 3. Yeah, but other than that, nothing really much that can go wrong for this fight. Again, flexing the BP Eater, Boost Chart, and all the other buffs that we have. So that's Hanet's chapters done. Now we can pick up Primrose, who is the last character that we're going to pick up. So we're nearing the end of this run now. And now that we're back in Sunshade again, we can complete the quest that we guided Maruf for. And this gives us the Trade Wind Spear, which is kind of similar to the Lizard King's Axe, except for wind. So the Trade Wind Spear increases your wind damage by 30%. And this is going to be part of our endgame setup. And the reason why we get wind specifically, I'll explain later. So I lost some time on the red eye split because my PB before that skips both encounters. But this is fine because my PB has to take an extra encounter later just to get the extra XP and JP back. Just to get the XP and JP that it was missing from skipping the 104 encounters. So I didn't get an encounter in Prim 1. At this point, these random encounters are all just time losses. I'm already pretty set when it comes to XP and JP. I just need to kill one more encounter in Prim 3. So back in Snow doing Prim's Chapter 2. Just gonna do a bunch of cutscenes and then rush the boss as well. Nothing really much to say about this chapter. So this is kind of like the calm before the storm. We're just finishing up with the chapters that we haven't finished yet, and then we're gonna make our way over to Galdera. Nothing really can go wrong in Prim's chapters. Possibly if you fail escapes in Prim 3 if you're not killing the encounter. And Simeon can't really do much to you, even if you get like a suboptimal fight, it's still recoverable. Yeah, using the BT blade again for extra damage. So coming up now, we are gonna, before we go to Noble Court for Prim 3, we're gonna go to Victor's Hollow to get a few items. So we're gonna talk to Alaic here, and then we're gonna guide him. So this is the second of the two allures that you have to do with Prim in the Cyrus route, but we can do with Ophi here. And while we're in Victor's Hollow, we're going to purchase the battle-tested axe from the merchant here. So the battle-tested axe is an axe that increases your ice and thunder element damage by 30%. So it's not going to be used for its elemental attack, even though it has a pretty decent stat line. But it's mainly just going to be used for the element boosting property. And then we purchased the Viper Dagger from the bandit here before we talk to him. So this is the thing you want to save money for. So if you don't have enough money for this Viper Dagger, you can get it later. It's just faster to do it now. So you kind of want to pay attention to your money before this, just to see whether you can get your Viper Dagger early. So since I skipped the Warbringer 30k chest, I needed some extra money. So fortunately, I think I got the double tomahawk discount. So discounts are when Tressa purchases an item and she has a chance to get like a refund, like a rebate. So the higher level Tressa is, the higher chance that you can get a refund, not a refund, a discount, and the higher percentage, the bigger the discount. So I was able to purchase my Viper Dagger there early, which is really nice. And then afterwards, after we kill the bandit, we get the Primeval Bow of Storms, which is the same as the Trade Wind Spear, except it's a bow. It's So we're gonna give it to Ophi immediately because we're gonna use it for this upcoming boss. So again, like I said, I'm gonna need some extra XP, so I'm gonna kill the encounter here. This is also one of the man's type dungeons, so you're always gonna get an encounter here. That's why it's more convenient to kill the encounter here and skip the one in Haunted 4. Gonna make sure that everyone's healthy and that Ophi has enough SP. And same thing with same thing with Albus here. Hit him a few times with the BT sword and then use Alfyn's. And in this case, we're going to use Ventus Salter because he's weak to wind, and our damage from Ventus Salter is boosted by the Primeval Bowl of Storms. So it deals just enough damage with the BT Blade to take him out. Alright, so we're now I'm gonna hit back to Everhold. We came to Everhold very early in the run. Now we're gonna come back here to finally finish Prim Chapter 4. Before that, we're gonna purchase 2 nuts from the Impresario outside the amphitheater here. The Sharp Nut and the Critical Nut. So I didn't mention this, but before recruiting Olbrich, we gave both the Primeval Robe and the Gareth's Helm to Therion. So the Primeval Robe I've already explained. The Gareth's Helm, which we got from Gareth, is a helmet that increases critical by a lot. So it's like the Flying Helm, right? Except it increases your critical by a far larger amount. And we're gonna want a lot of critical on Therion because we're gonna want all the damage we can get. So the Crit Nut is also for him, and the Sharp Nut as well. We also purchased an additional Sharp M in Wellspring before we got the Captain's Badge. And that will be for Tressa. So Tressa will have to use some elemental breaks on the bosses in the Gauntlet later. And since elemental break is not very accurate, we want to give her I prefer to give her the Sharp M. Just so she has a lower chance of missing. It's definitely optional though. But I would say the Sharp L is not optional on Therion because you really don't want to miss any of the bosses that he's gonna... we really don't want to miss on Phase 2 of Galdera. So now we're gonna do Simeon. Simeon has 2 phases. The first phase, we're gonna steal an item from one of the ads, the Mental Belt. The Mental Belt is an accessory which gives 65 additional elemental attack, so kind of like a weaker elemental augmenter. And then we're just gonna use Primrose to try to keep the party healthy, just in case we don't level. Primrose is pretty much always gonna level. So I just heal Tressa here, who might not level. And then from there, we're just gonna use Elephants and Ventus Salter. And again, steal the Mental Belt here. This is gonna be important because we're gonna need the elemental attack from Mental Belt, because we're gonna want to give the we're gonna want the elemental attack from the Mental Belt because we want to give the elemental augmenter to another person. Okay, so phase 2 of Simeon here. On the first turn, he always silences someone. And basically you want him to silence either Prim or Therion. So if Simeon silences either Ophi or Tressa, you need to delay your break to turn... you need to delay your kill to turn 3. Because you have to find... you have to heal the silence off of them. So I made a small mistake there by elemental breaking Simeon here. I didn't actually need to do that because it only lasts 2 turns and I'm gonna kill him on turn 3. So instead what I do is I use Peacock Strut, which gives the same damage boost as elemental break. And then Ventus Salter. So now we're done with Prim's story. We're going to finish up with Cyrus's and Therion's story, which are the last stories which we haven't completed. So while we're here in Northreach, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we're near the tavern. And then we're going to unequip Prim and give her the Honoring Bracelet so she won't miss Galdera later. And then we're going to get Cyrus back into our party because we're going to need Cyrus to get some JP. So this encounter here is always forced. It's always, it's a forced encounter here. And ideally you want to kill this encounter with Ophelia. But unfortunately what happens to me here is that Cyrus dies here. So I have to revive Cyrus and kill on turn 2. And this is actually significant because by killing... When you kill a battle on turn 1, you get a 10% increase in JP. And so by killing this battle on turn 2, I lose that 10%. And it actually will make a difference because I will not have enough JP to teach Cyrus all the skills that he needs in one menu later. So I have to break up the menu into 2 parts. So a bit unfortunate there. And it means that I will probably be losing some time on this split and later as well. So after the cutscene here, we have to go back to the first screen. So instead we just go to Dust Barrel first and then go back to Northreach later. So that's why the split name is Lucia, but we went to Northreach first. So now I do this menu. I get 5 Rune Lord skills on Ophi. This unlocks a support skill known as Elemental Edge, which gives her a permanent peacock. And then I give Cyrus Hang Tough, and normally I would give him 2 Dancer skills, but I don't have the JP for that now, so I just give him Leg Hold, which is mandatory. And then for Tressa, I give her Surpassing Power. Mainly the thing I want is cover, but since I'm gonna need Surpassing Power on her later, I just teach everything now. And then for the equipment menu, I optimize Ophi and give her the Vendetta Coat, which we picked up from Simeon, as well as an Empowering Bracelet. And this is because she doesn't need the extra elemental attack from the Sorceress Robe right now, but she's going to need the extra HP to live 2 hits from Darius later. And then I give Therion the Viper Dagger and the Plate Shield. He's going to need the Plate Shield to live 2 hits from Darius as well. So Lucia is an interesting boss. She starts off the battle with 30 shields, and what you're intended to do is to break her and then try to deal damage to her when she's after you've broken the 30 shields. But that's really slow, so what we do instead is we kill her without breaking. And we're able to do that because of Elemental Edge. So we don't have a Dancer for this fight, but with Elemental Edge we can enjoy the benefits of a Peacock Strut. So we Elemental Break here, and then since Ophi is going before Lucia on the next turn, I don't have to leg hold with Cyrus here, so I can save a bit of animation time. So I get a really fast Lucia fight here, but the split itself will lose me time because of that bad Northreach battle. So this is one of the coolest setups for Lucia. For this run is the setup for Lucia. We're able to kill her without breaking and without even hitting her for her weakness. So the good thing about Lucia is that she has very little HP for a Chapter 4 boss. She has the lowest HP for a Chapter 4 boss at 84,000. All the other Chapter 4 bosses have at least 90,000, and some even have like over 100,000. So now after beating Lucia, we have to scrutinize some books as part of Cyrus's story. And then the next thing we have to do is we have to go back to the previous screen to scrutinize the mural. But if we run out from here, we're going to get an encounter. So what we're going to do is we're going to warp back to Dust Barrow. And at this point, if we don't have the Viper Dagger yet, we would buy it now. But since I already have it, I can just go and scrutinize the mural. And that's the reason why purchasing the Viper Dagger before Prim 3 would be faster. Just because you have to run all the way to the NPC at the bottom left side of Dust Barrow to purchase it. But again, not the end of the world if you don't manage to purchase your Viper Dagger early, it's just slight time loss. So something I didn't actually know is that you're not supposed to skip this cutscene. You can skip the cutscene after the first question, but if you don't skip the cutscene, the second question pops up immediately. So I've been like skipping the cutscene for like the longest time, which lost me like a few seconds. And now we're back in Atlas Dam. You can steal a Curious Bloom here if you need one. You need one for later. But the more important thing that we want to get is the second Elemental Augmenter from Therese here. So now we have 2 Elemental Augmenters. Seems good. We're gonna give that to one of our characters later. So here is the steal which we've been training Therion the entire run to do. So now that he's at level 45, he's able to do this steal at level at 55%, and he gets it first try, so that's really awesome. And then we purchase the speed item. It's also for Ulbrich. And now I need to make sure that everyone's at full, which they are. And now we're going to go over to Mr. Darius. The last Chapter 4 boss that we're going to fight. And the entire party is set up in such a way that everyone survives to hits from Darius. So Ophelia, Therion, and Tressa all survive 2 hits from Darius, and Cyrus always gets put in cover range by Darius's first attack, which is an AoE attack. So if Darius targets Cyrus with the second attack, which is single target, Tressa will be able to absorb it with cover. I get a very good turn order here. I get Cyrus and Therion before Darius. So I get to skip all that battle animation. This is really, really good. It means that I got a really, really fast Darius fight. So I'll be able to gold this split, I think. Yeah, I think I do gold this split by about 5 seconds, so it's a pretty big gold. And save me about 20 seconds over my PB. And now that we're back in Boulderfall, the next place we have to go to is one of the maps in the Svarky area. And that's also one of the reasons why we do Therion's Chapter 4 last, so we have a free warp here. And this is the last part of the side quest which you have to do to unlock Galdera. So you had to do Alphys's and Kit's side quest before this to unlock this side quest, and then doing this side quest will allow you to unlock the Ruins of Hornburg, which is where you can go and challenge Galdera. So this tiger here, nothing really much can go wrong, but it can put you to sleep sometimes, which can be really troll. But you can't die to this fight. So now that we're done with this quest, we're going to talk to the Impresario again to unlock the Ruins of Hornburg, and then now we're gonna warp over there and finally make our way over to Galdera. Before that, we're gonna do this menu, so we give all the nuts to Therion and the Sharp M from Wellspring to Tressa. And then for the job menu, we're gonna make Ophi a Rune Lord and give her Balagar's Blade, which is the Divine skill. Balagar's Blade is a 6-hit magic skill that hits every element. And with the Battle Tested Axe, we get a 30% increase for 2 of those elements. We're also gonna give her the Mental Belt, and we're gonna deck Tressa out with all the magic equipment and both elemental augmenters. And Tressa is also gonna be the sorcerer for this upcoming section. And the main reason really is because she's able to equip both the Tradewind Spear and the Primeval Bow of Storms, which both stack together. So she's able to get a 60% increase to Ventus Salter. And that's the reason why Tressa is such a powerful sorcerer for the speedrun. So we use Ophi as a sorcerer for the base part of the game, the base game. And then for this post game, Gauntlet and Galdera, we use Tressa as the sorcerer because her damage far outdoes anyone else's. So for this Gauntlet, we're gonna mainly use Balagar's Blade to one-shot all of these bosses. Balagar's Blade is an extremely powerful skill, but since it's a divine skill, we cannot stack buffs like Alfyn's and Alfric's onto it. Whereas with a skill like Ventus Salter, we can. So that's gonna be the strategy for phase 1 of Galdera. We're gonna stack all the buffs onto Tressa, and then we're gonna nuke it with Enter Assaulter. So we do this, we do the gauntlet in a specific order. We do this fight first because there's absolutely no chance that we can lose to it, and it gives us a free heal because we always level. The fights here give a lot of XP and JP, and this is actually very crucial because it gives us the last bit of levels that we need for damage, and it gives us the JP that we need to learn the last few skills that we need. And of course, again, we do that fight first because we need it for the free heal, and because we do take damage in this fight. So the gauntlet is kind of just like a repeat of all the significant bosses that you had in each character's chapters, but they are a lot more powerful than the bosses that you faced in the base game. So Simeon here is one of the few gauntlet bosses, one of the 2 gauntlet bosses that don't die outright to a Balagar's Blade, so we use Tressa's Trade Winds. And you can really see how strong Tressa is now with just a ×2 Trade Winds. With the Primeval Bow of Storms and the Trade Wind Spear, we're able to deal so much damage with one of the weakest spells in the game. So last time we used to optimize Alfyn in this menu to give him armor and HP. But now we can just give him double Tomahawk because he has Hang Tough, so he will always live attacks. So it saves some menuing there as well. And we want Alfyn in the party now because Cyrus has all the JP that he needs. And the upcoming bosses will be weak to Axe, which we want the double Tomahawk for. So you can see it being put to good use right now. And then we're just gonna donate BP to Ophelia so she can Balagars. And Dragon is the second boss that doesn't die to a Balagar, so we're gonna need to use Trade Winds with Tressa as well. So this fight can be scary because Darius deals a lot of damage. I get a very spooky turn order. So steal HP here is gonna kill someone because it deals a lot of damage. But fortunately for me, he hits into Alfyn, who has Hang Tough, so he lives. So I'm able to do this fight as per normal. But this fight also dies to a Balagar's Blade. Sometimes it's a range, so you might need extra damage, but for the most part it's okay. And then Matthias here is completely free. So right after this fight, we're gonna do a menu. We're gonna teach Tressa Dreisang spell, which is the divine skill of the sorcerer class. It allows your magic attacks to crit, so it's a 1.25 times multiplier. It's kind of underwhelming for a divine skill, but we need all the damage we can get, so we just learn it anyway. And then we give Therion the warrior class and surpassing power. And also because we need Therion to be warrior for the upcoming fights. And then we teach the divine skills of the cleric, apothecary, and thief job to our characters. Because we're gonna need Alfrix and Doders for the first phase, and we're gonna need Abers for the second phase. So yeah, Balaghar's Blade just really making very quick work of a lot of these bosses. It's just such a strong skill. And this boss here, you can do a faster fight if you have extra Curious Blooms. I'm not sure if I go for it. I think I do. So yeah, you can use a Injurious Seed plus Curious Powder. Otherwise, you would defend with Therion to deal 4 hits of Spear. And this last fight here against Werner, basically we want to set up Therion to die. And this is because we're going to make Therion the War Master layer, and we're going to give him a support skill known as Fortitude, which increases your damage inversely proportional to your HP. So at 1 HP, Therion will get a 3 times multiplier to his physical damage. So we want to set him up to die here and revive him with 1 HP to get as much damage as we can out of Fortitude. So what we do here is we Insight with Therion. That's why we need the Warrior class on Therion. And then we use the Curious Mist with Alfyn, which was the concoct I mentioned before Ogre Eagle, which protects the entire party from terror here. So on turn 2, Werner will double strike and then kill Therion after we Insight. And then we kill him with Balaghar's Blade. Then afterwards we can revive Therion with just 1 HP. So this upcoming menu is the last big menu before, is the last big menu in the game and the last menu in the game. So we're gonna swap out some of our party members to teach them skills. And we're gonna give Primrose Hang Tough, Cover, and Leg Hold Trap. And then for Cyrus, we're gonna give him Elephants, and then the 2 Dancer skills, which I didn't manage to teach just now. And then for Therion, we're gonna give him BP Eater, as well as all the War Master skills besides the Divine skill. And then for Hanet, we're gonna give her Hang Tough, Leg Hold Trap, and Hang Tough. So for the phase 2 of the Galdera fight, it used to be done a bit differently. We used to use the War Master Divine skill, Winterhood's Battle Cry. It's a 6-hit skill that deals 1 hit from every weapon type, and it deals a lot of damage. But the problem is you had to get a lot of good weapons for Winterhood's Battle Cry, so we changed to A-Burst, which also deals a ridiculous amount of damage. So A-Burst is the Thief Divine skill, and it does damage based on your physical attack and your speed. And it has a very large multiplier, so that's why we can use A-Burst for the damage instead. So for this first phase of Galdera, we're basically just trying to stack all the buffs onto Tressa. And then we want to use Doders on Cyrus to give so that he can use the Revitalizing Gem on the entire party. So Doders allows you to use items on your entire party when they would instead be used on a single target. I actually make a mistake here and I heal with Ophi. What you want to do is you actually want to have a staggered turn order so you can heal in between the attacks. So since Cyrus was going before the eye on this turn, I could actually have skipped the heal with Ophi and use Cyrus to heal instead. Because everyone always gets a full heal from the Revitalizing Gem. Because what that means now is that I wasn't able to set up a rune with Ophi, which I would use to kill the ad. So I realize it right now after the eye hits Tressa with the Searing Orb. Because on the next turn, if the eye uses Electrocute and hits everyone, Tressa will die. So I realized my mistake here and I have to do a backup now. So I heal with Ophi instead of setting up the rune. And now I switch to the backup where I kill the ad with Tressa instead. So we aren't gonna stack all the buffs on the Tressa in this backup fight. We're gonna use multiple Ventus Salters instead. So now we defend with Alfyn, so we can break the eye on the next turn. And now we give Alfrix and Elephants to Tressa, and now we're gonna just nuke the eye with Ventus Salter. Only Light here fixes the range just because we don't have as much damage from Ventus Salter as we would otherwise have. We're dealing about 35,000 per hit here. In the normal fight, you would get about 65,000 per hit. So this backup fight, you still win, but it's slightly slower just because you have to do an extra Ventus Salter. And for the next fight, basically you're just looking for Therion to go before the Maw, which is the head. The Maw is the slowest part of the body of Galdera Phase 2, so reasonably you can expect Therion to go before. The reason is because you need to hit the Maw for over 50% of its HP, and this prevents the Maw from using a spell and wiping your entire party. And ideally you want at least one character before Therion to give him a Palm L so he's able to deal the damage with Abers. And this makes the fight a lot faster. If you get Therion first, you can still win. You just need to use Nightmare Chimera, Werner's Sword onto the Maw, which would deal the necessary damage. But then you have to use the next 2 turns to kill the other parts. So Nightmare Chimera is a skill that we teach specifically for this fight. It's a skill where you break a piece of equipment and deal a bunch of damage to do damage to your enemy. And that's also the reason why we picked up the Death Cleaver early on in the game. Death Cleaver is one of the strongest weapons, and Nightmare Chimera does damage based off the attack of the weapon. So the Death Cleaver is going to be able to deal a lot of damage with Nightmare Chimera. I get a very good turn order, 2 people before Therion, so I'm able to Palm L him immediately and use Abers. And here the Maw will use Dark Flames Curse when it's below 50% HP. If the Maw is before Therion, you basically just have to pray that it doesn't kill your entire party. But now that I've killed all the parts, this fight is basically free after I let hold Galdera here. And you can see the power of War Master Therion here with Fortitude, BP Eater, and Physical Prowess. Physical Prowess is a support skill that gives you Permanent Lion Dance, which is a 1.5 times multiplier to your physical attack. So after you let hold Galdera, you take its shields off, and here a Nightmare Chimera times 3 the Death Cleaver, which deals cat damage without breaking. And now I Nightmare Chimera Werner's Sword to kill Galdera. So if you don't have the Werner's Sword for the last one, you can just use Abers. It's just a bit faster to use Werner's Sword. And time is going to come right when the next text box pops up. And that is Galdera. A sub 350 on Switch was something we kind of knew was possible, but never really knew how feasible it was. So this run was kind of a big milestone for this category. I wouldn't say this run is unbeatable though, it definitely had some pretty good luck, but also lost a lot of time to execution and random encounters. I really hope this video can bring more people into speedrunning Octopath. I think it's a really great speed game because it's really easy to get into and there are many categories to run, so there's definitely a category for everyone. And Galdera is a fantastic category because there's a lot to do and to keep track of. It's definitely one of the more challenging categories to run, but the end result is very rewarding. So it's definitely a great category to show off at any event as well, especially with the recent route changes and the new strategies and optimizations that we've introduced. So like I said, this run was the first run to implement these new strats. So definitely hope that I'll be able to show these off sometime. Yeah, and that's all for this commentary. I really hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all next time. Thanks for watching.